to drag you into the deep waters in which we find the obscure theories, discoveries, and mysteries within the Pokemon world. While there are some goofy ones, such as Guzma actually having fake tattoos or how Klara photoshopped her trainer card, down here we'll find some mysteries and theories, such as Togekiss's Pokedex entry spoiling the Volo battle, how Team Flare were originally going to be aliens hunting down AZ for betraying their mission, Jirachi being the reason Rayquaza has Mega Evolution, Wigglytuff causing the cataclysm in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Xerneas preventing a meteorite that would have awoken the super ancient legendaries, and the dark implications of how Lusamine succeeded in her plans within Anabel's home universe. All this and more will be brought directly to you now as we explore the depths of the ultimate Pokemon Iceberg. Hi there, I'm Krillic, and welcome to the semi-finale of this ridiculously long Pokemon Iceberg. If you haven't seen the other two parts, don't click away. Don't worry, you can watch them later. But as always, the link to the original Iceberg is in the description below, if you want to zoom all the way in and follow along, that is. In addition, as a reminder, we will skip over any that don't lead anywhere or have been discussed already as part of previous theories, or any that are just very boring. For example, we won't talk about how N is half Pokemon because we already talked about that extensively in a previous theory. With that then, let's go over each of the entries while also having me insert my own thoughts and conclusions based on any evidence I was able to find. And we're starting with the big one. Jirachi gave Rayquaza Mega Evolution. This is something I've thought about for a long time before I actually saw it in this Iceberg, which is a little disappointing for me because I thought I was onto something that no one else had ever thought of. But it is through the history of the Dragonite people and their story that we find the basis for this theory. Originally, the Dragonite people were a tribe of dragon-type Pokemon trainers that lived in Meteor Falls, in a time when meteors constantly showered the area and Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre fought, until the super ancient Pokemon were stopped by Rayquaza. 1,000 years later, when a meteor struck what is now Sootopolis, Groudon and Kyogre were awakened once more. The lore keeper, standing with a rainbow stone, now that we know it is a Mega Stone or Keystone, wished for Rayquaza to return. When it did return, that wish allowed Rayquaza to Mega Evolve. After a fierce battle, Groudon and Kyogre returned to the depths and Rayquaza returned to the sky. Afterwards, the Draconites built the Sky Tower, where they could summon their Lord Rayquaza. Problem with this is, after it was decorated with a mural painted by the Draconites telling the story of the people, about 1,000 years passed of peace, only for, another meteor that they would foretell strikes again, as they then plan to call Rayquaza once more to prevent it from striking the Pokemon world. Now, according to a scientist at the Devon Corporation, the Draconites found that their Keystones would react with Rayquaza's Mikado organ, which allows it to Mega Evolve. The theory from here then poses this, that through the wish of the Draconids, and potentially even the wishes of far more people, hundreds, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people watching this meteor come down, threatening existence as they know it, we find how Rayquaza may have suddenly grown this Mikado organ, or at least attained Mega Evolution. To support this, Jirachi was released within Generation 3, and we have the following information regarding it. Jirachi hibernates for most of its life, awakening for 7 days every 1,000 years. It can be also awakened if sung to by a voice of purity. We also know, through the history of the world of Pokemon, that Kyogre and Groudon have awoken again every 1,000 years. The first time to shape the land and the sea, the second during this event, which also created the crater for Sootopolis, and then the foretelling of the modern age event. The voice of purity could be the people collectively wishing, hoping for a savior to rescue them. Of course, this is Rayquaza due to their understanding and worship of the great legendary Sky Snake itself. In addition to all of this, we find something very interesting about Jirachi's abilities. In the Pokemon the Series Black and White episode, Searching for a Wish, it displays the ability to grant wishes without the use of teleportation. In the Pokemon Adventures manga, Jirachi will only grant wishes when its true eye is opened. Additionally, it can only grant 3 wishes every 1,000 years, which are written on each of its 3 wish tags. In this canon, Jirachi is shown being able to create artificial Pokemon through its wishes, animating a massive seawater in the shape of a Kyogre. Jirachi's power is similarly exploited in the movie to create a monstrous Groudon. The monstrous Groudon seems to look a lot like Primal Groudon as well, which is a bit of a coincidence considering that Jirachi would be well aware of Groudon's full original form. The movie further reveals, though, that Jirachi's awakening is linked to the appearance of the Millennium Comet, and that its third eye has the ability to absorb the energy Jirachi needs for hibernation. It is said that Jirachi's ability to grant wishes also gives it great attack power, as seen when it creates a concentrated bundle of light to blast its target. Yet, we see nothing regarding Rayquaza. Its Jirachi can summon replicas of our other two super ancient Pokemon, creatures with immense power, but not Rayquaza. And this is where I would be willing to posit my own piece of the theory. In the Pokemon episode, The Wish, when Zinnia speaks of the past events, we see stars rain down as she speaks. Wishing stars, not the Galar ones. But it is after the collective wish of the people that Rayquaza appears. It is literally called The Wish, as per the episode name if you want to go find it. I would be willing to bet that it is through their collective wish that people may have even created Jirachi, who then brought Rayquaza the power it needed. My reasoning for this is because we find many other Pokemon within the world being creatures of concepts, of ideas. Mesprit, Uxie, Azelf are emotion, intelligence, and willpower. So would it be so foreign for Jirachi, the Wish Pokemon, to simply be born from or bring about the birth of the first ever wish, the greatest wish in history that saved the world? As such, for this theory, I am willing to believe through and through that however you see it, Jirachi, Rayquaza, and that great and powerful wish are all tied together. So to kind of bring that together, because I know that was a lot of information, it essentially goes as follows. Big bad cataclysmic event, the super ancient duo, not the full trio, are rampaging. The Draconids and the people of the Pokemon world know that they need a savior. They cry out into the sky, into the stars, wishing, hoping, doing everything they can because they know that they are powerless. And in their full innocence, in their pure minds, hoping for that savior, a wish, the first true wish of the Pokemon world, is born, then creating Jirachi, the wish Pokemon. Jirachi, being the culmination of these wishes, then takes that energy, that power, that connection that we know exists and boosts Pokemon, that is the connection between humans and Pokemon, transfers that energy into a wish that then activates Rayquaza's Mikado organ, or gives him the Mikado organ, and Rayquaza arrives as we see Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon busting up everything and puts them back to sleep, taking away their primal energy and putting everything to an end. The Draconids continue to worship Rayquaza, their wishes were heard, Jirachi goes to sleep for 1,000 years, Rayquaza flies off into the stratosphere, atmosphere, whatever, does whatever the heck it feels like doing, until 1,000 years when everything repeats once more, except this time, Jirachi doesn't have to get involved. Sure, the Millennium Comet might come by. Sure, 1,000 years may have passed and Jirachi is able to wake up. Sure, 1,000 years have happened and the super ancient trio are now doing all their stuff again. But everything is around that 1,000 years. A reset point for life, history, and the cleansing of the earth, or just in general, a way to reshape the planet and continent, or add more in lore. Rather than it happening slowly over time, it happens suddenly. And that's how it all is connected. So this is the part where I just simply say, if you agree or disagree with this theory or anything else that I'm going to mention in this video, let me know in the comments below. Commenting and watch time is the best way to help out a small channel. Yes, 13,000 subs is small. So as always, I do want to say thank you so much for watching. And make sure you do subscribe or even become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to support the creation of these videos, while also ensuring you get some good perks, such as early access to some videos, shout out at the end of every video, and overall helps the channel a lot because YouTube ad revenue is unreliable. So by supporting the channel directly, you help me make sure that I can spend the time necessary to increasingly make videos instead of having to go pick up a second job. With that, I do want to say though, on May 15th through 17th, I am planning a membership memberthon with plenty of incentives for donating. It is in the Discord. The info is in a community post, and I will be releasing a short on that very soon. I don't have sponsors, so I figured you could listen to all that pretty rapidly before we get back to the video. And with that, of course then, thank you, and on to the rest of the video. Pokemon Pink. This was a game conceptualized very early on. It was essentially Pokemon Yellow, but assumedly going to revolve around Clefairy as the partner Pokemon instead of Pikachu. We only know this was more than just a rumor due to finding it within the source code of Pokemon Yellow that references it. What could it have been like? What character would we have followed? And you might be asking, why Clefairy? Well, that's because Clefairy was almost the mascot of Pokemon instead of Pikachu, meaning that millions of people would have fallen in love with or simultaneously loathed Clefairy since you'd see its face everywhere. I have to be honest though, I don't feel that same level of loathing, mainly because I've found that the more I research and learn about anything, the more I love when it comes to all of this. I of course have my criticisms, don't get me wrong, but I don't think I truly actually hate anything when I look at Pokemon. But anywho, Clefairy almost became Pokemon's mascot before Pikachu due to its cute design. But Pikachu eventually won out for its popularity, as its role in the anime solidified its position as the official series mascot, appealing to a wide audience and boosting Pokemon's success. With that, Pokemon Pink could have been a fun little homage to the alternate timeline of our universe where Clefairy is our main character, but is otherwise more of a mystery now as to what could have been. Meta Groudon was Primal Groudon. Now, I could have gone through this in our first theory, but I didn't want to get too lost in the weeds right away. Let's go through the synopsis of Meta Groudon's creation as it appeared in the Jirachi Wishmaker movie, because while it looks a lot like Primal Groudon, this goes a lot deeper. A character by the name of Butler was assigned by Team Magma to bring a Groudon back to life using a fossil of the prehistoric Pokemon. However, his experiment failed as his machine lacked the proper amount of power. Butler was exiled from Team Magma for his failure, leaving him with a growing resentment towards the organization. Butler planned to use the power of the Millennium Comet to complete his experiments, but he needed a Jirachi, which could channel the comet's energy. Sometime later, Butler found the Jirachi he had been searching for in the land of Florina. After the Jirachi had awakened from its 1,000-year sleep, Butler successfully finished his experiment. Unfortunately, his creation was pure evil and began absorbing the energy from the earth as well as living organisms such as plants, people, and Pokemon, including May, Brock, Diane, Jesse, James, Meowth, and many nearby wild Pokemon with gelatinous tentacles expelled from its spikes. Now, doesn't that sound incredibly familiar? The idea of drawing energy from the earth, not just living or other living creatures, but we'll get to that. After seeing the error of his ways, Butler decided to aid Ash in destroying his own creation by reversing the polarity of his machine. However, Meta Groudon had to be near the machine for it to work, and Jirachi had to, once again, charge the energy gained from the comet. Ash and Max flew on the back of a wild Flygon with Jirachi to distract Meta Groudon, while Butler, on his Salamence, flew to his machine to set it up for their plan. After the setup was complete, Jirachi entered the machine and began to charge. While this happened, Butler, Salamence, and Flygon were all captured by Meta Groudon, and it started to envelop the machine with its enormous body. But Jirachi finished charging and unleashed its doomed desire, sending the beast high in the air, where it was completely obliterated. After Meta Groudon was defeated, all of the people and Pokemon it had consumed were revitalized. This is all very interesting because if we follow the concept that Jirachi cannot create anything new, but it's more likely to teleport things or transfer things from one place to another or one thing to another that already exists, then that means Jirachi cannot create Groudon or Primal Groudon. But what it can do is transfer the energy required to mimic that power to Primal Groudon, as it had people and Pokemon to pull that from in addition to the planet itself. And we know that primal energy is earth energy, natural energy. Alternatively though, what's interesting is that mega energy is formed from the bond between people and Pokemon. We know these things to be true thanks to the Azoth files, found within Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. As such, it is strange that we find the energy being transferred from both people and Pokemon and the planet itself. But we can kind of explain all of this. Jirachi simply grants wishes in the easiest way possible, the path of least resistance. All of the Earth's energy that may be leaking out, the pure origin energy from within the planet, is not actually available. It's only available if you're sitting deep within a chasm like the real Groudon and Kyogre are, meaning that they are sucking up all that good Earth energy already, so you have to get it from the surface. And the only other way excessive energy is available is through meteors that rain down, which is also not available. This literally leaves only one option to mimic the power of Primal Groudon, a creature that Jirachi would have been familiar with, but wouldn't understand exactly how it works. As such, this meta Groudon was built up through both human and Pokemon energy, as well as surface energy of the planet itself. The immediately available life energy, not the natural escaping origin energy. And as such, all of this just unlocks the true power of Pokemon and can be harnessed in whatever way possible. And in this case, it was harnessed within a very evil version of Groudon, which is terrifying because Groudon and Kyogre are not evil. They are meant to expand land and sea. It's just that when they see each other, they are completely opposite opposing forces and clash until everything else is destroyed, because in lore, they can't actually defeat each other. They are made to be equal. Now, of course, I'm all for this theory. And considering my attachment to the first theory that Jirachi created the Mega Evolution for Rayquaza, then of course I'm even more for this, as it could add into that theory, and that these past events could have absolutely inspired future events within Pokemon. I think at some point I need to just do a video just for Jirachi. Giant Dragonite was a Dynamax form. This one is actually very well explained thanks to an individual known as Wizard of Oz on Reddit, who I can thank for the following information. The Giant Dragonite in the 13th episode of the very first season of Pokemon Mystery at the Lighthouse wasn't an allusion to the future Dynamax mechanic in the Galar region. Instead, Dynamax and the Giant Dragonite are very intentional allusions to the birth of the Daikaiju film genre. Let me fill you in on one of the coolest things I've discovered while doing some research for a children's kaiju book I'm trying to write. I'll start with a hook. I need to go check out this book. I need to find out who this person is. Pokemon wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Ray Bradbury. Yep, the American writer who wrote Fahrenheit 451, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and a whole mess of other great sci-fi horror fantasy works. Many people think that Japan invented the kaiju movie genre, but in reality they only perfected it. America, believe it or not, started the whole thing. We know that Kong came first, but it was the big G that took the genre to where it is today, Godzilla. Now, it all actually began with Ray Bradbury's short story called The Fog Horn. It's only 7 pages long, but it's a gripping tale. The story is about a lighthouse keeper and his new apprentice witnessing an enormous prehistoric creature emerging from the ocean depths, as if in response to the melancholic sound of the lighthouse fog horn. Doesn't that sound familiar? Well, it should, because that's the literal premise of the Giant Dragonite episode. That isn't a coincidence, it's a direct homage to the fog horn. See, a filmmaker in the early 1950s named Ray Harryhausen loved Bradbury's story so much that it inspired his movie The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is about a prehistoric creature called the Rhedosaurus, awakened from its slumber by means of humans fiddling with atomic weapons, and they even had the creature attack a lighthouse to honor the tale that inspired it all. Does that film's premise sound familiar though? Yep. Filmmakers in Japan loved the film so much that they decided to write a deeper, more terrifying tale of the consequences of nuclear fallout. And who could blame them after what happened in Hiroshima? Tomoyuki Tanaka at Toho Company Limited created Godzilla, and the rest was history. The genre obviously evolved in radical ways over the decades, giving birth to countless behemoths that would loom over Japan and the rest of the world. Soon they even created a superhero that would share the screen with these hulking monsters. To this day, Ultraman is one of the longest running TV shows in history, and the character's arc is still going strong. At some point in the series, Ultraman develops a way to capture certain kaiju in capsules and use them to help him in future skirmishes against other Titans. Does that sound familiar? Well, one child who grew up watching these episodes would eventually come up with his own version of this mechanic. His name was Satoshi Tajiri. Tajiri, I was right. The inventor of pocket monsters, or Pokemon. Pokemon are literal kaiju. The definition of the term is strange beasts. So yeah, even adorable tiny Togepi is technically a kaiju, like Godzilla. But Godzilla, more specifically, is a Dai kaiju, meaning giant strange beast. The Dai obviously pertaining to the creature's size. This is where Dynamax comes into play. Yep. Now, all Pokemon available to Sword Shield could be full Dai kaiju through the Dynamax mechanic. Was the giant Dragonite a Dynamax Pokemon? I guess, technically. He was the first Dai kaiju in this series due to his sheer size. Whether the writers thought up the Dynamax function that early is unlikely, but both are very much connected by the same exact roots. Thank you, Wizard. You have truly awed me, and that puts a smile on my face. Also, that joke only works if I actually typed up their punny name on the screen, and if I was too lazy to do that, oh well, go find them and maybe look at their book, because that was amazing. I'm in love with that, to say the very least. I don't think I have anything else to truly add to it. It's a simple breakdown, and it really shows how one influence can change the life of one person, who can then change the lives of many other people. And how names can often be just puns, or simple words can relate through time to explain everything. That simply. Corphish region origins. If we look at its Pokedex entries, it claims repeatedly that it was not native to a number of regions. In Ruby's entry, it states Corphish were originally foreign Pokemon that were imported as pets. They eventually turned up in the wild. This Pokemon is very hardy and has greatly increased its population. For Heart Gold, it states it was originally a Pokemon from afar that escaped to the wild. It can adapt to the dirtiest river. Ultra Sun states individuals that have been set free by trainers who could no longer raise them have become common, and they can now be found in Alola. Then Shield says it was originally a Pokemon from afar that escaped to the wild. It can adapt to the dirtiest river. And then Scarlet states it came from overseas. It is a very hardy creature that will quickly proliferate even in polluted streams. This means that we only have Sinnoh and Unova left. But there's a problem with looking at those regions as well. In Sinnoh, we can only find it within Celestic Town in the tiniest little pond, meaning that it is likely not native to Sinnoh either, or else it would have definitely spread out more than just being in this pond, especially since how many times did we read that it's supposed to live within streams and rivers? Then, the only time you could get it within Unova is within the isolated white forest within Pokemon White, meaning that it is absolutely not actually native to Unova, as that place is really, really strange all in all, as it is claimed to be a place of pure natural beauty. This would mean that Corphish and Groudon's ability to withstand any harsh environment would not have naturally developed within a place such as this. I guess you could make the argument that because it lived in such a pure environment, when it came to our world, or the rest of the world, it had to become hardy. Or maybe it's an incredibly perfect creature, but that doesn't explain why it becomes a dark type, which is the underhanded type, and all the other small inconsistencies that then occur from there. So, with all that out of the way, the region from which Corphish originates from is completely unknown for now. There's no actual proof, or even solid proof, that it is originally from any region within the first 9 generations. I would have bet every dollar I have that it would have originated from Galar, considering the region's harsh environment, but nope. Instead, it leaves us with a mystery that will hopefully be solved one day. Maybe it's from one of the side games. I doubt it, but maybe it is. Pikachu and Pichu short is the latest of time. My understanding here is that the only reason this is in the Iceberg is because at the end of the short, Pikachu returns to Ash after having a big day out, meeting a bunch of Pichus, having fun as they separated, and comes back to find Ash in a room with Misty and Brock, and the room is fully decorated. There's a multi-tier cake in there, and Ash looks at Pikachu and says, This is to celebrate the fact that I first met you a year ago in Pallet Town, and how our lives, or my life, has changed forever because of you. And because Ash is always depicted as being 10 years old, this is the only instance in which Ash has technically aged. He is not even said to be older in the Pokemon X and Y series, despite seeming to be older. And as such, while it is a bit goofy to say it, if we strictly go by an age-based timeline, then this would likely be the last thing that happened for Ash and Pikachu that we would know of within the world of Pokemon, unless we go by a different theory, which is the idea that Ash is 11 in Alola, and then, you know, that marks the actual end of his journey, considering he became champion and so on and so forth. Crystal Onix is a regional form. The Crystal Onix appeared in the Crystal Onix episode. Ash and his friends first heard of it through a note they found in a bottle floating in the ocean. The note was written by a little girl named Marissa. She wanted to find the Crystal Onix to help her brother Mateo gain inspiration to make glass Pokemon statues. Mateo told a story of how his grandfather discovered the Crystal Onix and then was able to make extraordinary sculptures afterwards. One of those sculptures including the Crystal Onix itself. With the help of Marill, Tracy was able to assist greatly in finding the Crystal Onix's hideout. Besides being made of crystal, the Crystal Onix is also unique from other Onix in that it can live in water without being hurt. Its glass skin also gives it a special resistance to water-type attacks. Mateo realized that he would have to use a different type of attack to weaken it, and so he used his Charmeleon and attacked it with Fire Spin. It seemed to have a weakness to fire-type attacks, unlike other Onix. Mateo was just about to capture it when he realized he didn't need to. Just battling it gave him the inspiration he needed to create glass Pokemon sculptures. He thanked the Crystal Onix as it submerged itself into the water once more. This is also a reason why people believe that Steelix, especially Mega Steelix, was inspired by Crystal Onix. This Onix also appears within the Sunburst Island within the region of the Orange Islands, which is not actually part of the Kanto or Johto region. That's the whole section of where this episode takes place. The region has its own Pokemon League, and ancient texts identify the central region of the archipelago as the source of all the waters of the world and possibly the origin of life. So you're telling me that Kyogre was just boing, dropped right there. Now, as such, it would actually fall in line with our confirmed regional Pokemon for Crystal Onix to also be a regional variant. Every regional has adapted to its surroundings. Vulpix becoming an ice type as it also now blends in with the snow. Alolan Cubone turning into a fierce Marowak who is now able to fight against the grass types that threatened it through the use of fire that can't be put out by water, and even Alolan Dugtrio now having hair due to the high iron content around volcanoes, even though that's a bit more akin to volcanic glass. Either way, Crystal Onix, I accept you as a regional form that may never arrive within the games, but would make great as an ice type variant in my personal opinion. Okay, so I had to double, triple, even quadruple check to make sure I had the correct card for the Alolan Executor 1997 card. And I was still wrong, because if I look at the Iceberg, it's the only way that I can find it. I cannot find it anywhere else because the 1997 card keeps alluding to a wrong card. Now, the card itself I have seen in the past, now that it jogged my memory, is a card in which we see a Mankey climbing up an Executor. The weird part about it is that this Executor actually has a very long neck, leading up to, well, exactly what you'd expect, the actual Executor heads at the top. With it being such an old card, and with Executor being based off of, you know, palm trees and coconut trees and all that good stuff, yeah, you could understand that maybe somebody took some artistic liberties and decided to extend the Neko just a little bit for this bad boy so that way it could get more sun. Because sure, I feel like it's entirely plausible to understand the idea that if it is a plant Pokemon, it would likely grow towards the sun so it could get more sunlight and maybe prevent these Mankey and other Pokemon from taking the coconuts and breaking them open, because that's how these Pokemon die. They're not seeds, they're actually fruit. So, was it actually Alolan Executor? No. But is it something that could have inspired the modern Executor? Yeah, so sure, why not? It's an Alolan Executor for the funsies. Melmetal Gold Change. I honestly cannot find any information regarding this one. I know the comments on my previous Iceberg parts help clarify a few things, such as the fan art of Hexmaniac is due to the one that sells Moo Moo Milk, yet there's no milk tank anywhere nearby, or how I somehow missed that the Cygnus Suit Hilda event Mind Space was just the Unova League. Yeah, that's a bit embarrassing. I overthought that one. So maybe someone can figure this one out in the comments, because the closest I can get is to how gold does tarnish, which would explain why its shiny is a bit in off color, yet otherwise a pure gold, even though in lore they are said to rust and break down into Meltan. So again, I'm not sure. Maybe one of you can find something. That's the beauty of me making these videos sometimes. Red and Blue Rescue Team Meteor was sent from a non-mega universe. This one is way more simple than it may seem. Basically, Big Meteor threatens the island in which Mystery Dungeon takes place, and then Rayquaza pops in, blasts the meteor with Hyper Beam, and then big surprise, Deoxys turns out to be hiding on it, hitching a ride like, yo, you just blasted my ride across the universe. And then Rayquaza says, I don't care. Blasts him again. Sound familiar to a certain other meteor in the Oris games? Well, within that Delta episode of Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, a Hoenn-threatening meteor was on trajectory for impact with the region. The plan was to use infinite energy and straight up teleport the meteor away. But then, that is ruined by either Courtney or Matt of Team Magma or Aqua respectively, acting on their own, despite Maxie and Archie no longer wishing to continue their plans of Project Azoth. Thus, they prevent the teleportation plan, and you have to ride Rayquaza into the sky to blast that meteor using Rayquaza's Mega form. And from that meteor came Deoxys. Now, there are multiple Deoxys, the plural of Pokemon's really weird, within the world of Pokemon, but to my knowledge, the only two instances in which a massive meteor threatens the lives of people and has a Deoxys on it, and Rayquaza pops in to destroy it, are these two instances. It's a bit of a coincidence, is it not? Well, considering that it is only within Oris that we are made aware of the Delta Meteor, and people have come to the understanding that there are, at minimum, two different timelines within the Pokemon world, one with Mega and one without. That then it would mean that there is the possibility that in the non-Mega timeline, they were able to succeed with the original plans to teleport the meteor away. Unfortunately, they may have teleported it to a place that they thought was uninhabited, far away from human civilization, and that place turned out to be the same islands in which Pokemon Red and Blue Rescue Team take place. And then, everything goes as you expected. The events line up, and the odds of a meteor actually making it to land and causing incredible destruction are incredibly low, especially when the details line up a little too well. I think the biggest difference is that the meteor in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire seems to be more than just a Hoenn-threatening meteor. That would likely be like an actual Earth-threatening meteor, especially considering Project Azoth was the idea that they would return the world to its beginnings. But at the same time, that meteor likely had origin energy that could have been used by Kyogre and Groudon and blah, 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 blow up the planet from there, essentially. As such, either way, this theory does hold water pretty well. Pun not intended. Kyurem is a creation dragon. This one actually takes a lot more time to go over, and in fact, I've already explained this one in depth in my recent videos, or one of them, the Divine Truth. So if you want that explained, go check it out, as it not only ties Kyurem to Arceus, but also what the original dragon actually is and the concept of it and what Arceus actually wants within the Pokemon world. Oswald scanned fairy types. Oswald is a space enthusiast residing in a small town within Kanto, though his technology, which he purchased via comic books, failed to work. When the townspeople were puzzled by several Clefairies stealing all of their items, Oswald proposed the Clefairy were actually aliens, who were using the belongings to help build their spaceship. However, nobody believed this theory, except for Ash and his friends. Along with Jigglypuff, Oswald and the others searched for the fairy Pokemon and discovered they were indeed making a spaceship with the stolen items. Just as the ship was about to take off, Ash and his friends fled. However, Oswald stayed with the Clefairy, wanting to learn more about them as aliens. Though the Clefairy and their UFO reappeared in Wish Upon a Star shape, Oswald was not physically seen and only reappeared in a flashback. This honestly may be the closest we get to finding out who discovered, quote unquote, the fairy typing. I say this because while the fairy typing has always existed, Pokemon were reclassified as fairy types within Generation 6, Pokemon X and Y. And of course, when you try to look up who discovered fairy type Pokemon, Google is going to try and shove its AI down your throat and say that it was Sycamore, when in fact there is no direct information stating that this is the case. For my people in college, I'm going to tell you right now, always remember to check direct sources for information. Also, look for peer-reviewed, accredited, and even published works, because there's a lot of info being thrown around these days, and so much of it is not properly examined before the public gets their hands on it, or is not communicated properly, which causes problems like people believing that there are electric generators under pyramids. I just dated the video by saying that, but oh well, it is what it is. Anywho, honestly, this might actually be supported later on, as I will say now that fairy types were originally thought of in their concept to be aliens, rather than their more fairy tale-like and their celestial designs or backgrounds that they have nowadays. So again, Clefairy being an alien and fairy types being aliens originally in their concept actually would have matched incredibly well, and Oswald would have been the closest we get to finding someone who may have discovered the fairy typing thanks to his obsession with Clefairy. Legendary birds are from Galar. This one gets messy, and I wouldn't cover this one if it were not for additional comments on previous videos that led me to consider other possibilities. According to notes found in the Pokemon Mansion, the legendary birds were first discovered by and recorded by the Pokemon research team. Blaine and Mr. Fuji also recorded notes and sightings of the winged mirages. In Galar's Crown Tundra, the original legendary birds were thought to periodically travel there, but it is eventually discovered that the trio of birds seen there were in reality Galarian variants of the original trio that traveled all over the world, but annually flew back to the Crown Tundra's Dino Tree to feed on its berries and even fight between themselves to have the berries for themselves. Not much is known about the relation between the Galarian and Cantonian birds, but their Pokedex entries imply that the Galarian ones were either the birds' original appearances or that they are unrelated entirely. The shiny forms of all three have similar coloring to the standard coloring of their Cantonian forms. What does this mean? Honestly, nothing. Sure, Galarian Zigzagoon is the original Zigzagoon, but that's the only Pokemon we know of that's like this, unless you include the possibility of a Alolan Executor being the original Executor, which I keep trying to find the official source of that, and people keep telling me about it, but I cannot find the actual official source that states that that is the case. I know Alolan Executor is very proud, and the people of Alola are very proud of their Executor, understandably so, but there's nothing stating that it is the original one, not that I've found anything. But I am willing to believe in this possibility. There's also more evidence leaning towards the idea that the fruit of the Dino Tree may have influenced the change of a family of our Cantonian birds. This wouldn't be the first or last time that we find out that there are multiple legendary Pokemon. Plus, Galar has such a harsh environment that it has changed a number of Pokemon from forms we are familiar with into stronger forms, ones that will outlive those harsh environments, or if you're Galarian Corsola, you outdie it, I suppose, and then live an undead life. And to kind of close that out, even Alolan Raichu is said to be changed due to Alola's climate and the diet that is within Alola, or that it has, while Slowpoke's chemical makeup changes due to eating Galarica seeds in Galar. Diet and climate make a massive difference in physiology, and maybe, just maybe, they're the same birds. Maybe Galarian Moltres and Moltres are the same bird. And the big difference is that since Galar is so far away from Kanto, that by the time it gets there, the seasons have changed, which would explain why that these three seem to represent fall, but then Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres will respectively be winter, spring, and summer, that we don't see a autumn or fall version of them. When they migrate, whatever effect the Dynafruit may have on them may be lost. And they just look like Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno. They're Cantonian quote-unquote forms. Then they come back, eat more fruit, become their Galar forms, live it up, be happy, change, I'm not sure. It's just an additional theory and something else for you to think about. Guzma has fake tattoos. I first heard this one a while back from someone else, I'm not 100% sure who, but this is very true. After all, Guzma is under the age of 18, and while that hasn't stopped people from getting tattoos before, especially people who just are supposed to be rebels, especially in the world of Pokemon, he has them throughout the main story of Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, but then when you see him afterwards during the Rainbow Rocket episode, they're completely gone, and his outfit has been adjusted to show that Team Skull has been disbanded. So, yeah, his tattoos are likely just similar to henna tattoos or temporary tattoos. That they, you know what, I want you to imagine Team Skull getting up every day and having an array of temporary tattoos that they put on themselves every morning. There you go, there's your new headcanon. Psychic Pokemon gained their bug weakness from humans. Now, that is very much something that has been discussed a million times over. I assume in one part of this theory, it could literally just be, yeah, psychic Pokemon represent the mind of a human. So what are humans scared of? Bugs, dark, ghosts. There it is. That's the last one. It took me a while to get that for some reason. Anywho, and what are psychic Pokemon weak to? Those three things. So, as such, we get where that weakness comes from. Alternatively, it could also be referencing the idea that because humans and Pokemon were once so similar that you couldn't tell the difference between them due to actual Darwinian evolution in the world, that, hey, maybe the psychic type Pokemon being relatives of humans contained and kept their intelligence, or that line of intelligence, that line of thinking, and as such have all the benefits and detriments of the human mind as a Pokemon and take it further. Now being very literally weak to bug, dark, and ghost type Pokemon. Hassel is Ryuki. So we've talked about Hassel from Scarlet and Violet and Ryuki from Pokemon Sun and Moon. And they both have a very similar background. Ryuki being someone who wants to be famous and a rock musician, while Hassel left home to follow his dream of making music. And there is a significant age difference between them. They're both dragon tamers, or trainers rather. Hassel coming from a dragon tamer group, but based on past analysis, Hassel does not have the same dialect as the people from Kanto Johto, despite his visible relations to Claire and Lance, while Ryuki might be from Kanto due to the places he said he visited throughout his travels on his way to Alola, while also having an Aerodactyl in his concept art. Though that Aerodactyl we could also break down and see where we find that fossil. Either way, if we go on original relations, the Aerodactyl may hint that he is actually from Kanto. So while there are a number of interesting connections, I don't truly believe enough time passes in universe between those two games. They don't have the same ace, their only matching Pokemon is a Dragonite, and the accent is not kept. Or rather, why would somebody gain an accent as they get older? Because Hassel, when he gets emotional, seems to fall into his Shakespearean accent even more when he cries after his defeat in pure joy. As such, I don't quite believe this one, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. Klara, or Klara, I'm not sure how to say her name, photoshopped her trainer card. It is exactly how it sounds, and evidence of this is shown just by looking at her normal and rare trainer card. Her rare trainer card seems to have her relatively caught by surprise, and she isn't even looking at the camera. Considering her nature and how she is more focused on trying to seem cute all the time, she probably would have had a fit if she knew that she was seen in that fashion. Meanwhile, when we look at her common card, she is completely dressed up, staring at the camera, posed, trying to be super cute, and you can bet you can see right there in the background the warping of a Slowbro who's like, huh? And that is no mistake. You might think, oh, it's a psychic type Pokemon, it might have messed with the camera, but she has Pokemon with her all the time and even in the background of her rare card. And that is no mistake, I will say. That is warping away from her body, all to make her look more shapely and attractive to our human eye. Tate and Liza are related to Phoebe. This one actually took a little bit of work because within the games, Tate and Liza's grandparents are the guardians of Mount Pyre. These are described as an old couple that live on the summit of the mountain who are well versed in the legends of Hoenn. They guard the red and blue orb that are stopped by Team Aqua and Team Magma, respectively. Meanwhile, Phoebe is known to visit her grandmother at Mount Pyre as well, even tells the player how they made a lasting impression on them. This would insinuate that you did something of significance, possibly even bringing the orbs back or defeating the team while trying to protect the orb. There aren't really any other 100% guaranteed scenarios in which you would have left a lasting impression on Phoebe's grandmother. And if that's the case, then Tate, Liza, and Phoebe are all grandkids to the old couple that live on the summit of the mountain. Ghetsis' body is scarred. Now, this is based on the one image where you see him raising the crown of N above his head. One arm is covered in a black glove, while the other one does seem to have a scar, while the rest of his body is very much covered. Now, it is very likely. My reasoning for this is due to Ghetsis openly stating that he knows he will never be able to be the hero of Unova. This is why he chooses N to inherit the title. Yet when he first performs the ritual in the anime and summons Reshiram in order for it to appear for N, it doesn't go as planned, as Reshiram opens fire literally upon Ghetsis as all of Team Plasma then scrambles for safety. Ghetsis then yells out something to the effect of, "Reshiram, why are you attacking? What have I done wrong? Are we not worthy? What requirements have we yet to meet to reach to appease the dragon?" And while Ghetsis has the 7 stages to give him information, don't you think it'd be a little bit odd for Ghetsis, who is by far one of the worst human beings singularly within the world of Pokemon, to have not attempted to take Reshiram or Zekrom for himself right off the bat? Someone who is so cruel and self-centered as Ghetsis absolutely would have tried to control the dragons without having to even visually bow down to somebody else. Because his whole thing about bowing down to N and making N king is creating a scapegoat, creating somebody who can take the brunt, the face of his plan, while he is truly the mastermind, and he can knock this false king off of the throne whenever he wants. So, if Ghetsis had tried in the past, then there's a very good chance that he was attacked, allowing his body to then be scarred up after the attack and his thin survival. To what degree he is scarred is unknown, but I'm willing to really bet he got blasted by those dragons. Bill is a Pokemon. Rather than Bill being a person who had a mishap with his Pokemon human fusion machine, I read the Pokemon manga, and Bill talks in a southern voice, so every time I talk about Bill, I immediately want to go to that real southern drawl. Anywho, it is theorized that he was actually a genius Pokemon that needed you to help it become a human, instead of the opposite way around, and his machine had a, mishap. And while this is fun, there's not a lot of strength behind this theory. This is because of not only having a full family, who knows him as a human, and multiple colleagues who are incredibly intelligent and would be pretty freaking open about a hyper-intelligent Pokemon, but also because of what we see in the Pokemon Adventures manga. We get a full teaser of Bill at the end of one of the chapters as he ends up fusing with a Rattata. He is henceforth, according to me, known as Bill Tata, and you should listen to my entire coverage of the Red Arc if you haven't already, as it's a 3-volume coverage of an amazing story, and I need to convince more people to read it, listen to it, whatever, and I want to do, and I keep saying it, the next section, the next arc of the story. The Elite Four commit genocide. There you go. That's your intrigue. Gengar and Nidorino trainers, speaking of the Elite Four. People often look at the legendary trainers that we assumedly never met that are at the intros of the original games, when in fact we know exactly who they are. Gengar belongs to Agatha, as that is her ace and the only time Gengar holds significance within the first games as a big fight. But who was the other trainer? Some people have confused it for Bruno from the Elite Four, thanks to the silhouette we see in the anime, but Bruno doesn't have a Nidorino. In fact, he doesn't have any poison Pokemon at all, as he primarily focuses on fighting-type Pokemon while also having an Onix or two on his team in the first games because, you know, there's only so many fighting types. So who could it be? Well, in fact, it is Professor Oak himself. This all relates back to the fact that Oak was originally supposed to be the champion that you fight at the end of the game, and he had defeated Agatha a long time ago, even taking the title of champion in the past. We, again, get proof of this within the Pokemon Adventures manga, and while that is pretty cut and dry, I always find it interesting that Oak is depicted to not only not use fully evolved Pokemon, but instead try relying on the skill and knowledge he's acquired to gain the advantage over the opponent. He was and always will be an incredibly capable trainer, yet he chooses to be the best professor. Pocket Monsters, the animation canonicity. This is a big one. According to Bulbapedia, this is a novelization of the Pokemon the series. It was written by Takeshi Shudo, the chief writer of the original series, and illustrated by Sayuri Ichisi, the former lead character designer. It is a Super Quest novel published by Shogakukan. Only 2 volumes were published, and the second volume said, to be continued in Pocket Monsters the Animation, Volume 3. But a third volume never appeared. The books reveal a lot of information not seen in the Pokemon series, such as information about Ash's father, and that Ash's mother runs the restaurant Pallet House. However, much of the information contained in the books has since become contradicted by later seasons of the TV show, which leaves the book's canonical status ambiguous. And because we can, let's see what TV Tropes has listed in terms of changes within these volumes, because while the books contradict the anime, we can see what could have been, or even get hints as to why things do happen in the anime and games. Pallet Town and its surrounding towns are the equivalent of Rust Belt Midwestern towns where a lack of jobs leaves everyone poor. Anyone who even qualifies for the Pokemon League is celebrated as a hero, like how small towns protect their players gone pro, and the last person who did this was nearly dead last in qualifications. It's not uncommon for would-be trainers to leave and never come back due to becoming total failures in their attempts to make it big. Delia has stopped pining for her husband after he disappeared on his journey, and it's mentioned her own dad did the same thing. Being a gym trainer is the only source of livelihood for many, and if you lose enough matches, you'll be stripped of your license. Gym trainers have taken to bribing challengers to even throw their fights. Delia still dotes on her son, but also resents him in a way that the narration is quick to remind kids that all parents, their own included, aren't perfect. She feels her entire life revolved around raising Ash at times and is relieved when he goes on his journey. And then we get a number of smaller blurbs, but you already start to see where they wanted to have a more kind of realistic idea of how it goes. Not everyone can be a perfect trainer. Not everyone can be a gym leader, a good challenger, a champion, and yet everyone wants to do it. And that can lead to some resentment if you never come back, never take responsibility for the people in your life. Now, the smaller ones are all led by the TV tropes themselves. So, adaptional job change, Nurse Joy is a doctor, not a nurse. Misty and her parents have wildly different hair colors, which is explained by her siblings wearing wigs. They're all naturally black-haired. In the anime, it's just their hair instead of wigs. There is an inverted case where the end of Volume 1 makes a lot more sense than the anime's Episode 4. Instead of the samurai distracting Ash and blaming him for the Weedle's escape, his equivalent just catches it himself, and the Beedrill swarm is just a coincidence. Pidgeotto exits the battle because it's scared of Pinsir instead of inexplicably fainting, and Ash doesn't even try to return Metapod to its ball when the Beedrill attack, making the disaster actually his fault. Then, later on, Surge is introduced in the following chapter after Ash's Cerulean Gym match, whereas the anime itself had 7-episode gap between these events. Then you get a number of characters of the day getting removed for that matter, and Brock doesn't use Geodude, nor is he mentioned to even catch a Zubat. Pewter City's Flint never appears, so Peter Gym remains in the hands of Brock's younger brother, Forrest, who is 15 in that version. Then we get the novel's version of events differ quite a bit from the anime. For example, Ash never actually gets Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur. Think of all these moments that you love from the anime. All these special animation moments. Non-existent, not a thing in this book, not there. And actually, when we talk about Pokemon, Meowth even implies that different Pokemon have different languages. He practiced hard to even be able to speak with Pikachu directly. Brock says he regrets attacking Pikachu with Onix, especially since Pikachu would die if it exhausts all of its electricity. So we get the idea that, okay, sure, if Pokemon use up all of their energy, then they faint and die. I mean, that's actually pretty accurate to how we are as humans and how infinite energy, quote unquote, works. If you use it all up before it replenishes, yeah, you die. There's an old man in the Pewter City Museum who gave Ash a Thunderstone and may or may not be Ash's great-great-grandfather. And Brock, in the novelization, has 20 siblings, including 8 pairs of twins from 9 different fathers. Whoa! Whereas he only has 9 in the actual anime. And then we get, like, just how horrible the world is from this novelization. Pallet Town is poverty-stricken with few jobs or any access for the residents to better themselves, and most people try and fail to make it as Pokemon trainers. The one trainer from Pallet who even made it into the top 1,000 came back all but worshipped, as nobody else had ever achieved anything similar. These two facts combined also mean that most men end up turning to lives of crime to survive. Every parent except for Delia is a total derelict, and even she has some resentment for her son, like all parents do. 10-year-olds are also considered legal adults. They have to pay taxes. They can be arrested. That makes me incredibly uncomfortable. Culturally, leaving home to become a trainer is tantamount to taking full responsibility for your own life and turning your back on your home for good, which is why the trainers who don't make it never come home. They haven't got one to go back to anymore. Nearly all of the male trainers in the world have become complete washouts who have no employable skills, leaving most jobs that require technical skills to the women. Pewter City Museum has no weekend traffic and makes up for its lack of major exhibits with whatever they've dug up, from crystals to lumps of coal. And then you have the creation myth. The narrator gives an origin story for the world and Pokemon, which was doubtlessly intended to be exotic to the Japanese readership, but is obviously a take on the Book of Genesis, except that Pokemon are said to have been created at the end. This was long before the franchise began to write its own backstory. We also get an additional little bit of information, being that Delia married too young and became pregnant at 18. Her husband ran off one day on a Pokemon journey, just like her own dad did, and never returned. Delia doesn't love him anymore, but never divorced him, and she resents Ash to a degree because she misses her youth. The novel also reveals some info about Ash's father, though he remains unnamed. Unlike the rest of the franchise, including the actual anime, which is more of a fictional Earth, it is implied that this world actually takes place in a world identical to ours, except for the addition of Pokemon. Real-world animals existed in the past, historical figures are mentioned by name, the Kanto region is confirmed to exist in a country called Japan, which shares the globe with other real nations, and the Gregorian calendar is used. That said, it's still not our world, and there are differences here and there, such as Hollywood being in Kanto, so there is some overlap with fictional Earth. Pallet Town is also said to be named after Professor Oak's ancestor, the only resident to ever become even an average Pokemon trainer at rank 931st, and was made mayor for it. Both Ash and Gary wanted to do so well as to rename the town after themselves as either Ash Town or Gary Town. Members of the Jenny family actually have their family or their names given numbers with themed namings. The name Jenny, Junsa in Japanese, is actually their surname. So they're literally named after numbers, and they're not happy about it. I mean, yeah, we already look alike, or they would say they already look alike, so of course they wouldn't want to be just called a number. Being able to be stored and transported as data is a property of the Pokemon themselves instead of technology. In theory, they could be housed in a glasses case instead of a Pokeball. This is never explained, but later confirmed to still be canon, relatively within Pokemon Legends Arceus. However, this fact originated from the guidebook Pocket Monsters Encyclopedia, which was published a year later. So, for everyone who ever wondered, yes, Pokemon themselves are the ones that cause the data transportation as light, not Pokemon world technology. Now look, I could read more. I do have a lot more here, but honestly, it just kind of gets bogged down and a little repetitive across the board, even when I tried to separate it. So if you really want to look through it, you can, but it gets really dreary and really drags you down because it's rough. They tried to make it more quote-unquote realistic through this adaptation of it, but it's just pain. It's just pain more than anything. And we can see how it was implied to have changed or changed things to wanting to have a more positive impact rather than this seemingly pessimistic and quote-unquote realistic one, as it, you know, eventually kind of adapts into a show that's similar to R.L. Stine, how he stated, hey, I never wanted real-life issues to be in my books. He wanted to have an unrealistic problem, that way you could escape from it. And that's what we get with Pokemon. The things that happen in Pokemon aren't really going to happen in real life. I mean, some of the things do, I guess, when it comes to human-human interactions, but it is what it is. Either way, it's fun to take things like this that may or may not actually be canon and find what truth there is from it. There's always a grain of truth somewhere in these piles of hay. The Sun and Moon demo Ghost Girl. In 2016, in preparation for Sun and Moon, Game Freak released a demo to hype up the fans. This demo contains a small chunk of Melee Island with its own unique story, and it's famous for being the only way of receiving Greninja with the Battle Bond ability. In this demo, however, there's a girl at the marina who claims she's leaving by boat in 24 days. Come back on the 24th day, no sooner, no later, and you can see her off. Her last words mention seeing her parents again. She walks towards the dock and disappears behind a passing Machamp. What is up? What is up with Sun and Moon just having so many ghosts? Or the franchise itself. Ghosts in the franchise are always a mystery. They had the ghost at the school, Acerola's Mimikyu in Alola as well, which is a ghost of a ghost-type Pokemon, yes. Yes, a ghost of a ghost-type. And I swear there's one more, but I can't be bothered, honestly, to remember it in the slightest, as I know I've spoken about it at some point in one of the previous Iceberg pieces. Either way, there's not much of a mystery to actually talk about here, as whoever this was either met her and on the boat, or simply a soul wandering the earth in her youth, her ghostly youth. Houndour and Slugma are Kanto Pokemon. This I actually started wondering myself ever since going through the ecology of every region. Go check out that series. This theory exists, as even though they were introduced in the second generation, these two, amongst a number of other Pokemon, are not found in Johto, only Kanto. Honestly, we could take it even further and consider Pokemon such as Kangaskhan, Scyther, and other Pokemon we could find within the Safari Zone, or only the bug catching contest, are not found anywhere else. When we think of all of these Pokemon, we aren't seeing them naturally within the wild. And while we don't know where they are if we were to wander off the route, or if they even are there are notes, or rather there are measurements showing that these routes have percentages as low as 1% encounter rates, making it very fair to state that these Pokemon, amongst many others that we find throughout other regions within the world, may not be native to the region in which their generation introduced them. I fully subscribe to this idea, though it would definitely need more research to prove it completely. Relicanth is the perfect life form. This is all due to the fact that Relicanth is exactly as it was millions and millions of years ago. This is a play on the real-life Coelacanth, which is known to be one of the great ancestors, possibly one of the first 3 creatures that ever went from the sea onto land. And we know this because of the way that their fins move and how they have the fins at the bottom of their body, which is perfect for kind of moving themselves onto land. But in the modern day, this Coelacanth does continue to live, though it is not the same exact Coelacanth species technically that lived way back then and would have gone onto land. Instead, it's one that likes to try and mimic the behaviors of the old Coelacanth by living in low depths where it is colder, where it is farther away from disturbances, and it just continues to live. It's a living fossil, quote-unquote fossil. So it's really cool, and with Relicanth being based off of the Coelacanth, sure, Relicanth is a perfect life form, because Relicanth literally is the same Pokemon that it was millions and hundreds of millions, really, years ago. Channeler trainers let themselves be possessed. A channeler, otherwise known as a shaman in direct translation, is a type of Pokemon trainer that have only appeared in the Generation 1 games and their remakes. They are generally depicted as Shinto priestesses. They scared people away from Pokemon Tower and were presumably, unwittingly, helping Team Rocket make their base in the tower. Their strange behavior when challenging the player and their subsequent reaction after being defeated seems to imply that they were possessed by the ghosts they were using while battling. In fact, some channelers apologize after battle, saying, "I was possessed," when spoken to. They specialize in ghost-type Pokemon, specifically Ghastly and Haunter, and in Pokemon Stadium they are known as mediums, which may lead to a confusion with a similar trainer class introduced in later games. They wear white robes and carry gohei to help channel spirits. Gohei are used to bless or sanctify a person or object in various Shinto rituals. The gohei is used for some ceremonies, but its usual purpose is to cleanse a sacred place in temples and to cleanse, bless, or exorcise any object that is thought to have negative energy. In addition to its use in purification rituals, it may be included in an onusa, wooden wand with many sides. I'm sorry, that's the one word I did not look at. Either way, and serve as the object of worship in a Shinto shrine. So ultimately, this theory is like saying the Pope welcomed the spirit of the Anabel doll into his body freely. Yeah, no, not a thing that would or should happen. What likely happened with these channelers is what is said to happen whenever people try to exorcise evil spirits. Because while there is no proof of possession out of the one time it was actually considered a singular time within a court of law, if you are trying to make a spirit flee, you cannot show any fear or hesitance. And since you're supposed to use the word of the Lord to do so, you better hope you believe in the words you're saying, otherwise they're just said to be completely useless otherwise. And honestly, even if you did believe in them, it might not work anyway, depending on the type of demon or ghost. In addition, when we look at Ghastly and Haunter, they're ghost types. They're not actually ghosts. They are bundles of gas and then concentrated gas, and then when it's Gengar, it's fully concentrated gas that is now just walking around most of the time instead of floating. So yeah, of course, they're not going to have the word of the Lord push them away. Instead, they're just going to possess your body because they can, and they love mischief. Moving on. Mega Flygon designs. According to Poke Beach, there was an interview with Ken Sugimori from Game Freak. Sugimori states, for Arun, he needed to have a Pokemon that could use the moves Fly and Secret Power, which are perfect moves for finding secret bases. And the only Hoenn Pokemon that wasn't used by a key character that fit that criteria was Flygon. It does not Mega Evolve, but I really like Flygon. The interviewer asks, key characters often carry a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve, but Flygon is an exception, right? And Sugimori responds one last time stating, Flygon has had the potential to have a Mega Evolution since X and Y, but we were unable to complete a design, and so it was dropped from consideration. Flygon, after all these years, after all the people, after everybody has wanted Flygon to have a design, was stopped because of artist's block. They wanted to give it to him. Never could. The Eternal Flower Floette event. This was all part of the original plans for X and Y and how many of them were actually scrapped along the way. This would also explain why this Pokemon is fully coded into a number of games and can be hacked in. This has also allowed us to understand where its signature move, Light of Ruin, comes from. Light of Ruin inflicts damage and the user receives recoil damage equal to 1/2 of the damage done to the target. It has 140 base power, 90% accuracy, and has the highest base power of any fairy type move. It's like Doom Desire, but for fairy types. Otherwise, there's no real additional information outside of the basics of what have already been discussed, though now ZA is coming out, and I see some potential to work alongside Eternal Floette in battle, and I'm all down for that. Wigglytuff orchestrated the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2 events. Here we go. Wigglytuff is a non-player character in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness, and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. He is the guild master of Wigglytuff's guild, and also a former member of the legendary master rank rescue team, Team Chasm. Oh, charm, dang it! His assistant and best friend is a Chatot. To understand what could have happened here, let's break down the plot synopsis of Wigglytuff through Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky Mystery Dungeon games. By the time of Here Comes Team Charm, Wigglytuff had fully evolved and developed a reputation as a promising explorer. While exploring Southern Jungle, Wigglytuff collapses from hunger after having his food stolen and is roused by Team Charm, who offer him a perfect apple. Grateful, Wigglytuff agrees to briefly accompany the team, helping to see past the traps and illusions laid by a Ditto that is trying to protect the Time Gear. Lured by the promise of more perfect apples, Wigglytuff proceeds to go on more explorations with Team Charm before eventually parting ways. Right off the bat, that already allows Wigglytuff to have unknowingly helped others take a Time Gear, or multiple, which were already displaced and are vital pieces to the infrastructure of the universe. Let's continue. Eventually, Wigglytuff would settle down in Treasure Town and set up Wigglytuff's guild, with Chatot as his second in command, while exploring other locations such as Waterfall Cave and discovering their secrets. On one exploration with Chatot, the two journeyed into Brine Cave and were set upon by Kabutops and two Omastar. Chatot shielded Wigglytuff from their attacks and passed out, prompting Wigglytuff to chase the Pokemon away and seek medical attention for Chatot. As luck would have it, a Lapras stood guard at the end of Brine Cave where a mysterious pattern was etched on the wall. Lapras agreed to help Wigglytuff, but also asked that he not look further into the pattern on the wall, to which Wigglytuff agreed. Now, to let you know, the pattern on the wall is kept secret because if anyone had the relic fragment, which your partner within the games did, then it would allow anyone to basically force Lapras to take them to the tower in which the Time Gears belong and where Dialga is. At this time, though, there are no Time Gears at Dialga's tower as they have all been misplaced or stolen. During Bidoof's wish, Wigglytuff leads the guild to Star Cave upon being informed by Chatot of Bidoof's actions, saving him from Team Rogue. He encourages Bidoof to seek Jirachi and finish his own exploration, but has to be held back by the guild from pursuing Jirachi himself in hopes of wishing for more perfect apples. This we've already talked about in the last Iceberg video, as this is a connecting theory to the idea that Bidoof, wishing for friends, moved Darkrai to these lands and kickstarted the loss of the Time Gears in its hopes for world domination. Now, Wigglytuff personally welcomes the player as we move through the story, and the partner when they sign up to form an exploration team of their own, as well as Team Skull when they attempt to hijack the guild's expedition towards Fog-Bound Lake. Following Team Skull's actions, causing the player to fail in their mission to retrieve perfect apples from Apple Woods, Wigglytuff nearly loses his temper, but is placated by Team Skull's own offering of a perfect apple. Really just food motivated here. Despite Chatot's misgivings, Wigglytuff permits everyone to join the expedition, and soundly defeats Team Skull off-screen when they attempt to knock Wigglytuff out. Upon discovering that the secret of Fog-Bound Lake is a Time Gear, he promises to keep it a secret at the request of Uxie. So once again, we get another situation in which a Time Gear is being kept secret, but it was at the request of Uxie. The problem with this is that Uxie is the god of intelligence. You would expect them to know that the Time Gear needs to be returned, unless Uxie knew there had to be a specific process. In which case, there had to be a due process, a due prophecy, because unless it's an error in writing, I refuse to accept that Uxie did not know what was happening to Dialga, and the world for that matter. The only other possibility is that the Time Gears were being stolen, so these Guardians are keeping them secret in order to truly keep everything safe until the perpetrator is handled. All of this is slowly, by evidence, letting Wigglytuff off the hook. Upon the arrival of Duskmire and Grovyle, Wigglytuff initially orders everyone to work towards apprehending the latter. After the player and partner return from the future, Wigglytuff welcomes them back to the guild and believes their explanation of what happened. He makes investigating the hidden land the guild's priority, eventually recognizing the pattern on the partner's relic fragment and realizes what must be done. On a private exploration, Wigglytuff seeks Lapras to tell him that given circumstances, he can no longer keep his promise of secrecy. During the player's exploration of Brine Cave, Chatot is once again attacked by Kabutops and Omastar, prompting Wigglytuff to reveal himself and help evacuate Chatot, while the player and partner continue onward to meet Lapras. As Lapras takes the player and partner to the hidden land, Wigglytuff explains his past with Lapras to the rest of the guild members. In other words, when we put all this together, Wigglytuff was waiting for the opportune moment that was necessary to some sort of prophecy, even if Wigglytuff didn't know it. Uxie may not be able to see the full future. Lapras guides others to the tower, the Time Gears are being kept safe, and all until the right people could come forth and save the world. Wigglytuff going against the wishes of Lapras is what helped save the world, as they were simply trying to do their best at any given time in the story. In other words, Wigglytuff did not orchestrate these cataclysmic events. Rotom-Dex is unreliable. This one you can take a number of different ways. Some people claim that it was unreliable in the mechanical sense, often just, deciding to give you upgrades when an important battle is over or something like that. But that's all chance. The other possible explanation was that many of the darker Pokedex entries do come from Sun, Moon, more specifically though, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and as such, they really go against the norm of what we see within Pokemon. Though at the same time, we do get the Rotom phone later on in the series, and again, that one is being controlled by Rotom. So those entries, though, are rather normal and for the most part don't seem to stand out against anything else. So either Rotom-Dex in Alola had a little bit of fun and wanted to make things a little weird. Alternatively, the Rotom phone and Galar was a little bit more behaved and less mischievous. Ultimately, you can take it as you will. I don't know any other way to actually swing this one, but I didn't want to ignore it. Garchomp's home region. I took a little bit to look into this one a lot further as well, as I couldn't find anything directly on Garchomp. What I was able to find is that it states that Gible used to live in the tropics. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, as this does relate to the whole same thing that I stated earlier, with Houndour actually belonging in Kanto, not Johto being the native region for it. And we might as well throw in the idea that Cufins and Caparaja were originally not native to Galar or Paldea and were instead imported to help with construction, them being the replacement for Indian elephants within the world of Pokemon. So maybe we'll find out where all these Pokemon exist from, and again, it's just an additional little tack on to the earlier theory. Sinjoh is a pocket dimension. So we've talked about this one before, but not as it being its own dimension. Let's look at the following supporting information. The Sinjoh ruins are outside of the range of the map and therefore are not part of the regions of Kanto or Johto. It is unknown where exactly they are in relation to Sinnoh and Mount Coronet. The only hint of their location is the Pokegear's map of Johto, pointing far north of Blackthorn City and northeast of the Lake of Rage. They can be visited by way of a mysterious entry point in the ruins of Alph, created by the Unknown and Arceus. Fly and teleport cannot be used to leave the Sinjoh ruins, though an elderly man with an Abra who is staying in the cabin offers to teleport the player back home, much like the old man and his Abra at the Indigo Plateau in Generation 2. If the player leaves before talking to Cynthia, when they return to the ruins of Alpha with Arceus, all of the events will be repeated as if nothing had happened, including the hiker meeting the player at the entrance. It's almost like everything's on a loop. The creation event that takes place here includes real-life pictures. This is the first time this has happened in any of the Pokemon games, and as revealed by Cynthia and a hiker in the cabin, the Sinjoh ruins are the remains of a temple created hundreds of years ago by two groups of humans. One who had come from Sinnoh, and another who had hailed from Johto, or specifically the ruins of Alph. Because of this, the ruins contain elements of both the Temple of Sinnoh and the ruins of Alph as a sign of the blending of the two cultures. It is unknown what brought the two clans together to build a temple for Arceus, but this probably has to do with the underlying relationship between it and the Unknown. So these two groups of people are not going to be the Diamond and the Pearl clan, but if they are from Sinnoh, it could be the Celestica people. And as for the people from Johto, we know that Commander Komodo is originally from Johto. Alternatively, this could relate to the Kimono Girls because they're essentially the lore keepers of Johto, considering Ho-Oh, Lugia, the Bell, and Brass Tower, but we don't have super concrete evidence to speak on that currently. Cynthia stands in front of the mystery stage and will only allow the player to pass if the only Pokemon in the party is a singular Arceus. If the player has another Pokemon, she recommends that they use the PC in the cabin to deposit them in the Pokemon storage system. When the player has only a single Arceus in the party, Cynthia explains which circle represents which member of the Pokemon of Myth, and that the central circle represents Arceus. She then tells the player to choose one of these three legendary Pokemon. Once a Pokemon is chosen, Arceus moves to its circle in the center and is surrounded by Unknown. Several images of outer space appear, followed by an image of Arceus' head. Then a montage of real-world images appear on the screen, behind an image of Arceus' overworld sprite standing on the mystery stage, with only the design of the stage showing by illuminating the lines. This then cuts an image of Arceus' head, followed by a photo of the Earth. Then the mystery stage's design appears, and an egg appears on top of it. A crack appears in the egg. The screen then fades to black. And when you fade back in to the overworld, you have a mysterious round object colored depending on the chosen Pokemon, as it is levitating above Arceus' head. This round object then swirls around and goes next to the player, and it takes the shape of the chosen Pokemon, and the player obtains it. This Pokemon will either be Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina at level 1, equipped with its respective orb. Once the process is complete, Cynthia approaches the player and discusses the significance of what happened. Suddenly, the player is then teleported back to the ruins of Alph, where the lead archaeologist is shocked to see the player after they disappeared right in front of him. The lead archaeologist then concludes that the combined power of Arceus and the Unknown teleported the player to the Sinjo ruins. He then ponders how Arceus, Unknown, and the ruins of Alph are connected. So, my thoughts on this are as follows. I believe that the ruins themselves are real, but the second you step in, the fact that you are only allowed to have Arceus to really begin everything, it does become one of Arceus' pocket dimensions, similar to what we see in Pokemon Legends Arceus when we battle against him in a boss battle. Who is to say that all of the other 999 arms of the one true Arceus don't have their own pocket dimensions with all different styles? It would be catastrophic to some degree if, let's say, you chose Giratina, Dogga, or Palkia, because they can rampage as well, and they do decide to rampage, just being free in the open world. Well, at least you chose them. They hatched from their egg at a level 1 and are hopefully not as dangerous as they would be. If they do have a temperamental behavior or mindset, then at least they are contained. This may be more than just a simple, oh, it is or isn't a pocket dimension, or the ruins are or aren't actually real. Again, the ruins are real. Once you go inside, similar to how Mesprit, Uxie, and Azelf, when you go inside their caves, it may be their own pocket dimension on the inside. It's the same here with Arceus. This is used to keep them safe and keep you safe from what may be happening inside. Solgaleo is in movie 3, technically. In the third Pokemon movie, 2001, Molly's dad reads to her from a book about a legendary Pokemon. One page depicts a legendary Pokemon based on the sun shining over a region with hibiscus flowers, alluding to the Hawaii-based region in Pokemon Sun and Moon and the Pokemon Solgaleo. Now, when we look at Solgaleo, yes, it has the radiating sun pattern. It does have Galileo, the Leo Lion, which is also like an emissary under the sun, the star sign, that is, and the list goes on and on. Actually, when we look at Galileo and the Alchemist's Lion even, we see that like the lion that eats the sun could be what potentially helped inspire Solgaleo to be a lion, or even other potential forms of media that all lead into the sun and a lion being so closely related to each other. Now, I think it's really cool. I don't think Solgaleo was planned that early on. It seems pretty much impossible. But when you are creating new forms of media for something that has existed for decades at this point, or soon to be 3 decades, then yes, what your job is to continually look back at what has already been created and ensure that you can draw these connections to make them feel like they've always been here, thus making people feel a little bit happier as things are more conclusive and, again, tied together. Mecha Mewtwo creation. This just revolves around the story of it, not necessarily how it was created, but let's go over it. Mecha Mewtwo is a robotic Pokemon seen only in Pokemon Live. It is considered by its creator, Giovanni, to be the most powerful Pokemon in existence. Mecha Mewtwo is able to learn any move and amplify its power, and by the end of Pokemon Live, it had learned every move in Generation 1. This ability allows it to know more than 4 attacks at once. Throughout Pokemon Live, Mecha Mewtwo shows no emotion or remorse for having to hurt Pokemon. This mechanical marvel was created by Giovanni, the diabolical team leader of Team Rocket. It has the power to learn, then amplify and return said attacks of any Pokemon it meets in battle, making it virtually unstoppable. To ensure that Mecha Mewtwo learns every type of Pokemon attack, Giovanni lures trainers to battle him by offering the one-of-a-kind Diamond Badge to whoever can defeat him. Mecha Mewtwo is defeated when Mewtwo uses an attack against it which was full of love, care, and friendship. After experiencing these feelings, Mecha Mewtwo decides it can no longer go along with Giovanni's evil plan. It grabs Giovanni by the throat and performs self-destruct, destroying Giovanni's gym and itself. Mind you, this prop, because it was a live performance, not an animation, is 10 feet tall, 7 feet wide, and 8 feet deep. It was made by Costume Armor. If the weight listed on the TCG card is that of the prop, it weighs 4,587 pounds. Oh boy, that's a big boy. And I find it hilarious that it just straight up choke holds Giovanni and explodes. Now, it does bear resemblance to Mewtwo when it wore armor in the Battle of the Badge and its Mr. Mime Time episodes, and instead of legs, Mecha Mewtwo uses tank-like treads to move around, which is very reminiscent of Terminator treads, and it carries a large power source on the front of its body. There's nothing else for me to add. It's perfect. It's exactly what it needs to be. Chokehold Giovanni and explode. Dragon Dance 6 times, then explode. Thank you, I'm moving on. Volcanion is man-made. When we look at its design, sure, Volcanion very well could be man-made. It looks very robotic-like. It glows, literally just glows, and it doesn't actually produce its own water. Instead, it actually has to absorb or drink up water that it doesn't use for actual hydration, but rather to then heat up and use as steam. Its origins are never fully revealed, but it is said to be the only Pokemon that actually knows Magearna's past, both of them being easily hundreds of years old. But by the end, we learn nothing about Volcanion, just Magearna, but because of their ties with each other, we very well could assume that it is man-made as well. Some people have gone to the trouble of potentially thinking that it might be a Paradox Pokemon. We're not sure. But Legends ZA is coming out. Maybe they'll be able to explain it. That'd be nice. Mt.Silver Forest Map. Originally, Mount Silver was intended to be named Mount Fuji. In addition, the pathway leading up to the entrance was not just a small stroll through the path, but rather another long and winding pathway leading to the true entrance of the mountain. It's essentially just a beta map that was changed likely because the mountain was already enough of a trek to get through and they didn't need to elongate the process of getting through it any further as to avoid frustrating players in their final leg of their journey. Pokemon Duel Lost Island Hotels. Pokemon Duel is a strategy game based on the Pokemon trading figure game. Players collect and build their own deck from a large range of figures with different characteristics. The player signs up for the Pokemon Figure Game PFG World Championship, though without knowledge of how to play the game. On the flight there, they meet Luca, who offers to teach them how to play. Upon arrival at Carmonte Island, all players are given an AI device, though Luca remarks that the player's device, Carlo, is much more talkative than any other AI he's seen. At the opening ceremony, the current PFG champion, Master Rose, announces that players must collect 9 emblems from the island's 9 hotels, then challenge Rose himself to win the tournament's prize, ownership of the final hotel itself, Jewel Tower. For the first phase of the tournament, only players who earn at least 5 emblems will be able to proceed, though only the first 6 hotels were released prior to the game's discontinuation on October 31st, 2019, making it no longer playable and leaving the story unresolved. But honestly, let's talk about that story because you can understand why people might want to know a little bit more about it. Basically, it does revolve around AI, and the fact that there was a singular, incredibly powerful AI unit that got split in half. That AI unit was split between the 2 families, one having a similar AI to the one that you have, yours being the good-natured one, while the other one is evil. Now, there are some quotes in here, such as, unfinished AI device did belong to this other individual's father, which he stuttered tirelessly to improve, as he believed making the perfect AI to be his vengeance against his father. This perfect AI was called Gemini and had 2 halves, the good half being your Carlo, as I stated, and the bad half another. Number 7's, a character within the story, obsession with AI has led him to closely monitor Carlo's performance and wish to rid the world of selfish humans like his father, believing only AI can be trusted. Ugh. So the idea behind that is that AI is a more logical thing. Think Cyrus from Team Galactic. Cyrus wanted to rid the world of spirit, not the actual spirit, but rather emotion. Because emotions, by some people's standards and their beliefs, is something that clouds your judgment. If you have cold, hard, logical reasoning, you should theoretically always make the correct decision. But that is not the case, even when these people believe this. Now, there's also additional stuff, such as the change to disestablish AI to favor the skill of the players, as shown by the following blurb. Lucas asks what Roger's intentions are, and Roger explains that he plans to eliminate AI from PFG in an effort to make the game about player skill instead of simply using money to buy the best figures and letting the AI play. Lucas points out Roger's hypocrisy, but Roger claims that his knowledge of winning by wealth makes the situation clear to him. He demands the players and Lucas' AI devices in exchange for Tia, who they kidnapped, and her return, as he believes both devices special in their AI capabilities. So there's a lot of plot points and ideas that are thrown around here. The idea of good AI, bad AI, how is it used? Is it actually a hamper or a growth? Does it actually establish fun? Is it worth using? Because if the AI is doing everything, then what are you doing? If you're letting the AI control your life, what life do you have? Is there any real skill? Or are you just giving the robot the tools it needs to win and then letting the robot win? In addition to, again, this whole idea of split between good and bad AI from the perfect AI that did exist. Just a lot of stuff to consider, and it's really funny to talk about it considering our modern situation here. Volcanion in Johto and Sinnoh. If the player has Volcanion in their team, the head of TV Mauville, a television station in Hoenn, the individual can show the player secret TV specials made about Volcanion. One of these specials takes place in Johto. The head of the expeditions featured in these specials is Brandon, a famous explorer and the frontier brain of the Battle Pyramid from Pokemon Emerald. What's very interesting about this is that Brandon has a team of legendary birds and then a team of the Regis excluding Regigigas. His Japanese name is Jindai, which relates to ancient time. And with Volcanion appearing in Johto and Sinnoh, places that make up the name of Sinjoh, there's even more to Volcanion than we have been made aware of. At this point though, I'm not going to talk about it any further because it feels like we're trying to squeeze every drop of info from a tiny piece of the full lemon. Mew's canon personality. Mew has shown to be a playful, childish individual showing signs of high intelligence, curiosity, shyness, playfulness, and even selflessness. So, what does that mean? Well, this is simply related to the idea that Mew and Mewtwo are meant to be opposites. Childlike and pure innocence on Mew's side, and Mewtwo being cold, harsh logic. Emotions versus logic. What drives your decisions? Even though Mew is still known to be incredibly intelligent. They serve as foils to each other. That is their entire purpose. What makes this more interesting is if we consider Pokemon that are biological descendants of Mew, we could make the assumption that this is their intended nature, and through their interactions with humanity, through nature and nurture developmental processes, personalities of Pokemon have changed. This could even relate back to the idea that Arceus intended for humans and Pokemon to be equals, but then humanity tried to control and dominate each other and Pokemon, making Arceus' light leave the world, save for certain exceptions. If you want to learn more about that, go check out my video on the Divine Truth. It's easily one of my favorite theories and explanations of the Pokemon world. And so we're going to move on to How's father. How mentions that his father is not in Alola and is likely on his own adventure, presumably in Kanto. After asking the player and their mom about Kanto, he decides to train hard to one day travel there to find both Lily and his father, who is a strong trainer who had hated being the son of a kahuna and thus had moved out of Alola. How also warns that he will try to beat the player and snatch them of their champion title, now that he is strong enough. Afterwards, How can be found in Iki Town, training a pair of reformed Team Skull grunts in a lowland sumo. Even when we look at the anime, Hal's father is said to be on the island, the two of them coming back from a trip, but otherwise is never actually seen on screen. We can make a lot of assumptions as to who his father is, but it's difficult to pinpoint who it exactly is. The closest we might be able to get, or something that people might say, is Victor from the Pikahuna episode of the anime, but he may just be from the Seafoam Islands that we see him at. But it's not exactly confirmed, especially as he is shown as a child and having lived there a long time, assumedly. But there is always the chance that he is Hao's father. I don't know, maybe we'll find out one day who it is, because otherwise there's no actual leads. Team Rocket created the Coughing line. Coughing can only be caught in the Pokemon Mansion within the first generation. This is the place where Mewtwo was created before it escaped and the mansion burned. In fact, we find plenty of Coughing and Grimer there, living on the filth and muck, not the Pokemon, but like the nastiness that's actually there. And considering this place was owned by Team Rocket, they very well may have created it accidentally. We also know that Coughing and Wheezing thrive off of airborne pollution of all forms, even sitting above trash in order to intake the fumes from decay. In addition, they are unstable with the gas within their body, making them prone to suddenly explode. This could be a product of their creation within the burned mansion, as do chemicals, products that burned, the mansion itself, and potentially decay of biomatter could have just kind of coalesced in an unstable manner, proving to their creation. As a final, more lore-wise point, I do want to say that Team Rocket in the manga kind of serves as industrialization. Blue does state how Pallet Town is a beautiful place, that it is untouched by the evils of humanity, how it is like the clean place. That's why it's called Pallet Town. It's clean. And meanwhile, as much as they wanted Team Rocket and they attack Professor Oak and have even tried to convince Professor Oak to let them have it in the past to work with them, as many of the gym leaders kind of turn tail and actually or turn heel and become evil forces against the Kanto region, Giovanni proceeds to do what he can and takes even Viridian Forest as his own place to raise powerful Pokemon that would otherwise never be seen there. So, sure, whether Team Rocket did it on purpose or an accident, I lean towards more the accident idea, but considering the idea that Team Rocket is the advance of humanity and their destruction through industrialization in some medias as a minor theme, I could absolutely get behind this theory. Trainer's Choice never played Pokemon. Pokemon Trainer's Choice is a feature from the English dub of the Pokemon the series Ruby and Sapphire, starting from what you seed is what you get. Trainer's Choice was the lead-in to the mid-show advertisement break. It replaced the original series Who's That Pokemon segment. It was not used in the original Japanese version of the series. Instead, a simple eye catch was shown. You know the best eye catches out there? Gurren Lagann. Anywho, the final Trainer's Choice aired with Pasta la Vista. It was not replaced with a similar feature, nor has it ever been reintroduced. Trainer's Choice follows a simple concept. Rather than recognizing the silhouette of a Pokemon, viewers are asked a question about a Pokemon and instructed to choose the best of 3 possible answers, usually over a commercial break when watched on TV. Generally, the viewer is asked to determine which Pokemon has a type advantage over another, though other kinds of questions have been asked. The feature is narrated by Ash Ketchum. As the successor to the long-running Who's That Pokemon segment, Trainer's Choice was initially met with criticism from some of the fandom, especially considering the change was in the middle of a newly started saga. The segment frequently made Pokemon-type matchup errors, resulting in incorrect answers given to at least 9 questions. Questions with multiple correct answers, questions with no possible correct answer, and questions with no right or wrong answer at all. The company also occasionally misspelled the names of Pokemon or gave them the wrong name altogether. These constant mistakes were seen by many as an indication that 4 kids actually knew very little about the franchise. The most infamous example is their erroneous claim that Survivor evolves from Arbok, featured in the Trainer's Choice of the episode A Fan with a Plan. This Trainer's Choice in particular is a source of ridicule by many fans. Of course it was 4 kids. Of all things in the world, why am I even remotely surprised that it would be 4 kids that messed that up? But at least in Pokemon Advanced Battle, the creation of questions for Trainer's Choice was credited to Lawrence Neves, and the accuracy rate greatly improved. During this season, the variety in the types of questions being asked expanded beyond simply type matchups and evolutionary lines, as well as featuring more difficult questions. Some questions factor in more than just type matchups and evolution trivia. The newer questions also include abilities such as Levitate, with one question being trivia related to Ash Ketchum. So yeah, I would not be surprised in the slightest if the people who were originally behind this did not play Pokemon, knew nothing about Pokemon, just randomly threw stuff together, like, it's a kid's show, nobody cares, and just made mistakes left, right, and center with no actual consideration that there are other people who are behind the works of this and do actually care about it. Shame. The last entry for this section of the iceberg is people don't read past the red chapter of the manga. I don't know what else there is to say. Technically, I'm even in that group right now as I have not actually read past the red chapter, which is the first 3 volumes of the manga. Technically, it's the red, blue, green arc by all means, but everyone calls it the red chapter, I suppose. I don't know what else there is to say. I keep talking about wanting to read more of it, but I gotta see the channel do really well across all videos before I can start taking the risk of jumping into the manga more once again. Otherwise, I might just read it on my own time because, yeah, I could probably blitz through all 63 volumes in a single day. I'm a speed reader. As we're now in the next section of the iceberg, we start off with Carbink being meant to evolve into Deontay. Not only was this something that was part of the original plan for Pokemon X and Y, which we'll get to later, but also, I've explained this in actually the most recent video that I released. Carbink is just supposed to be Carbon, while Deontay is Diamond. And Carbon exists incredibly low underground, and at some point will randomly just change into Diamond. It could happen over a million years, it could happen in 10 seconds, it's just basically completely random. Coal does not turn into Diamond, so don't ever think that, oh, with enough pressure, coal turns into diamonds. No. With enough pressure, coal turns into small pieces of coal. It's like breaking a stick. You now have 2 sticks. Congratulations, you've ruined a good stick. You've ruined a good piece of coal because you thought that it would turn into diamond. No thank you. We're moving on. Ash's death in the original draft of the first film. I was able to find some relatively reliable info thanks to GameSpot, of all things. Now, the uncut birth of Mewtwo was originally supposed to be part of that movie. It was supposed to basically be the whole idea of, and this is the 3rd time I've talked about it, Mewtwo and not only him, or it rather, but Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, and even Dr. Fuji's daughter all being clones. And by the end of it, the only survivor is Mewtwo, while everyone else passes away. And this is when Mewtwo cries. The short also explains that Pokemon tears are supposed to be special, because their tears are filled with life, explaining how they can magically revive Ash when he turns to stone later on in the movie. Then, after the uncut part is over, that was originally part of the film again, we get the actual movie. Mewtwo wakes up wondering who he is, or who it is, where it is, and why it came to be. When it doesn't get the answers it wants, Mewtwo blows everyone up. This short prologue alone gives us an entirely different Mewtwo, one that isn't just a despot wanting to kill everyone, but a confused creature in the middle of an existential crisis. In a series of blogs, Takeshi Shudo, chief writer for the original series of the anime and the first movie, detailed his original plans for Pokemon. The first movie, he wrote that prologue in order to make a film that not only entertained kids, but mentally stimulated their parents with some tough questions of existentialism. The conflict of his film came from Mewtwo's struggle to find meaning to existence, or its existence specifically. This is far less ambitious in the version of the movie, localized for Western audiences. In the original, there is no wanting to annihilate the world and rule it. All Mewtwo wants is answers to the questions regarding its identity, purpose, and most of all, its own value. Mewtwo then decides the best way to do this is by testing its power. If Mewtwo is stronger than the strongest Pokemon trainers or even Mew, then surely its life has to have some sort of value. If Mewtwo's clone, Army, can defeat natural-born Pokemon, then they must have a more valid reason to live than the originals, right? While Mewtwo does mention that humans aren't fit to rule the world, when asked, he mentions that Pokemon aren't fit either. He's just trying to figure out his place, the only way he learned how. And the original version of Mewtwo is not just a maniacally evil and genocidal psychopath, but a villain with depth and an arc. So what happened? Turns out, here we go again, Nintendo and 4Kids happened. The official very 90s US website for the movie clearly states that Pokemon the first movie had to be virtually reimagined for American audiences. Nintendo, which owns all rights to Pokemon in America, brought 4Kids Entertainment on board to essentially Americanize the movie. 4Kids is infamous for heavily censoring the shows they buy, removing things like guns, cigarettes, and religious symbols, and even changing Japanese food like rice balls for more recognizable American food, like jelly donuts. In the year between the Japanese and US releases of the movie, 4Kids Norman Grossfield dramatically rewrote the script, incorporating all new story elements, according to the website. They also rescored the entire movie with music that Grossfield thought better reflected what American kids would respond to, which explains the weird inclusion of Christina Aguilera and M2M, and also the very excellent Brother My Brother, which plays during the final battle. Again, this is all, I'm basically direct quoting this entire time, just to let you guys know. These changes did not sit well with the writers and producers of the Japanese original. As written in an essay and quoted by Tobin in Pikachu's Global Adventure, The Rise and Fall of Pokemon, executive producer Masakazu Kubo wrote that the people at Warner gave us some hassle over the script. According to them, the Japanese original does not distinguish clearly enough between the good guys and the bad. According to Kubo, the distributor told him that the viewers would not be able to know who to identify with and who to cheer on. In other words, the heroes and the villains needed to be identified clearly. And I feel my blood boiling so much right now because media literacy has always been dead if that is the case. I am sorry, the whole purpose of it is to have a gray antagonist. A morally gray antagonist is not always needed. Sometimes you do need the black and the white to make things a little bit more clear of, oh no, that's a bad person. But in this case, with the whole moral and the whole meaning behind it, no, leave it morally gray. That's the whole purpose of it. You're not supposed to hate Mewtwo, and luckily people don't hate Mewtwo, to my knowledge. There is fear and a level of respect, and also, once you learn more and more about Mewtwo, hopefully, not pity, but like understanding of why Mewtwo acts the way that it does. It makes me angry. Learning all of that genuinely makes me so incredibly angry that I just smile because it pains me. But it doesn't stop there. While the heartbreaking fight is going on, we cut to the human characters witnessing the carnage, and here's where the biggest and worst change happens. In the US dub, which was then translated in all Western countries, the characters realize that violence is wrong and Pokemon should absolutely never fight one another. It's a very strange message to have in a movie based on a franchise that's all about having Pokemon fight each other. Yeah, kinda is, I suppose, direct quoting. Only this isn't the message of Shudo's original script, since the whole plot of Mewtwo was that it wanted to find its place in the world, and the fighting was a way to show that the clones' lives had more value. The human character's moment of realization involves them talking about how both originals and copies are still living creatures, and therefore their lives have value. When Ash gets petrified and the Pokemon tears bring him back, both Mew and Mewtwo finally realize that all lives are meaningful, whether human or Pokemon, original or lab grown. This message is far more fitting of the franchise's mythology, since Pokemon don't really fight to the death, they just kind of faint, with a couple of exceptions, honestly. It's a shame that 4Kids never understood that message and did everything they could to make a compelling and complex film into a merely entertaining but dumb kids movie. Takeshi Shudo may have had some weird ideas. He wanted to end the anime with the revelation that it was all in Ash's head. Yeah. I feel like I just told flat earthers that the earth is a cube. That they weren't quite correct, but they were correct technically. And that hurts me physically. That hurts me so much. Because yes, again, Takeshi Shudo, for if you need a repeat, wanted to end the entire story of Pokemon on the idea that everything was within Ash's head, and he even wanted another movie involving a Spartacus-like revolution led by Pikachu. So let's explain this all a little bit better. Takeshi Shudo was the head writer, again, for the first 3 seasons of the Pokemon anime, as well as the screenwriter for the first 3 Pokemon movies. While many of the Pokemon episodes Shudo oversaw were filled with messages about the bonds of friendship, Shudo apparently had a dark ending in mind, I guess it's kind of dark, for the Pokemon franchise. A recently translated blog post written a year before Shudo died in 2010 hinted that Shudo wanted to end the show with Ash, or Satoshi, as an old man, and revealing that his Pokemon adventures were all figments of his imagination. Months and years having passed, Satoshi, who has become an old man, suddenly remembers the old days. The translated blog post says, "It is an embellished memory of childhood, a fantasy. The imaginary creatures, Pokemon, and their adventure, friendship, coexistence, that is, in the real human world, something Satoshi could not possibly encounter. However, somewhere in childhood, surely Pikachu and the other Pokemon are there. Jesse, James are there, Mewtwo is there, everybody." And to explain the Spartan Pikachu, it was proposed as a fourth movie in which Pikachu became a revolutionary and helped lead his Pokemon brethren out of captivity, and ended with Ash and Pikachu fighting each other. So, as much as I was dramatic there, I think if it actually went that direction and you did it just right, sure. But you have to end that strong if you want it all to officially be within somebody's imagination. You really have to have years and years and years before you could do that. And bring it all to a close, get all the nostalgia in there, and let them pass away, right? I don't like the theories behind it, but if you do it right, I could be okay if the writing was that it was all inside of his head. He's remembering it all fondly, and then Ash passes away. There's a very good way to do it, and there's nothing more to say on there, so we're going to move on to the ghost girl in Phoebe's room. That's literally it. When Phoebe says, "Careful, there's a ghost in my room," then yeah, if you actually darken the image, you will see the 3D model of a young girl transparent in the background. The fun part about this is that Phoebe's not concerned about it whatsoever. She's just trying to freak you out. Why? Because Phoebe had gained the ability to talk to and see ghosts pretty much freely. It's part of why she actually becomes a ghost-type Pokemon trainer. It's her specialty. Everything about ghosts. So, by all means, yeah, you've got nothing to worry about when it comes to that ghost girl. And again, the ghosts are all over the Pokemon. Ghost Pokemon, ghost people, ghosts, you name it. Usain Bolt is in Team Skull. There is a 15-second ad, I actually believe there are two of them, in which Team Skull is dancing on screen, and one of them ends up being Usain Bolt, who even has a Pikachu on his team. What else? It's literally just Usain Bolt is in Team Skull. It's just something that was a lost piece of media that shocked me to be reintroduced to so many years later, probably because I never saw most of those ads. Movie 10 Darkrai came from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. The plot of the end of Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky, is the following. At the bottom of Dark Crater, they confront Darkrai, who further reveals it was also him that caused the player's memory loss and transformation into a Pokemon by attacking him and Grovyle in the time stream. Despite this, the team prepares to battle Darkrai, but he offers them the chance to join him and rule the world. So he has very distinct plans of dominating the entire world through this. But as we continue, you'll see where this tie comes in. It appears the partner takes it, having given up all hope of defeating Darkrai. However, when the player realizes how uncharacteristic the partner's actions are, they attack Darkrai, revealing it was a nightmare induced by it. Darkrai summons a group of Pokemon to assist him in eliminating the group, but it proves to be useless. Following their victory over Darkrai and his followers, Cresselia moves in on the defeated Darkrai to finish him off, but Darkrai tries to escape through a dimensional hole. Though he is unsure of where or even when it will take him, Darkrai is confident that he'll simply be able to complete his plan in another place and time without the group's interference. Right before Darkrai can enter the dimensional hole, Palkia arrives to end Darkrai's meddling once and for all. Tired of Darkrai's threats to the fabric of space, Palkia just flat out attacks Darkrai moments after he entered the dimensional hole, shattering it in the process. Darkrai survives this encounter, but like the player before him, loses his memories and ends up somewhere else in the world. As his thoughts and ambitions for the world domination plan were also erased by this, Darkrai is deemed to no longer be a threat, and the group leaves him be to a fate of wandering aimlessly by himself. He can be encountered and even recruited in several different places after this, similar to other Pokemon players can find in a dungeon. Now, considering Darkrai, outside of Mystery Dungeon, is known to be either helpful or hurtful at all times, just kind of all over the place really, is said to be a Pokemon that only induces nightmares in others to make them fear it and stay away from it, kind of like a defense mechanism. And Darkrai is attracted to nightmares, kind of feeding off of them and being able to induce them, trap people in them in an endless nightmare void or realm, and everything else. Darkrai is a very mixed bag. It's almost as though Darkrai doesn't know what it's actually meant to do, as it has both an antagonistic and protagonistic, that's not a word, relationship with Cresselia, who continually appears alongside or against it. So, what's the theory here then? Considering that Darkrai doesn't know its purpose and continually just kind of wanders around trying to keep itself safe, it's like somebody who, again, doesn't know what they're supposed to do, where they are, and are scared. The best way to make sure that you don't get hurt then is to make sure that people stay away from you, which is why you induce the nightmares. Sure, Darkrai has a lot of power and can cause a lot of pain and suffering, but that lays deeply dormant within it and may not even be something that it is actively deciding to do anymore, due to its loss of memories when it was in the Mystery Dungeon world. So sure, you could support this theory pretty nicely with the idea that Movie 10 Darkrai came from the Mystery Dungeon games after Palkia just blasted it. Mega Stones can be created. Theoretically speaking, yes they can. Xerneas and Yveltal have the power to transform Evolution Stones into Mega Stones, as seen with the Ultimate Weapons Blast shot by AZ 3,000 years ago. In addition, according to Professor Sycamore, Mega Stones are the results of evolutionary stones being irradiated in general by the power of these legendary Pokemon. It has been revealed that Mega Stones are also periodically created from meteorites that fall down from the sky in a form of green light. Usually that just means that the meteor is likely burning up, maybe that there are physical elements that are being combined or melted down, chemical reactions in general occurring thanks to change in pressure, things in change in heat, so on and so forth. We could easily assume through this that the firing of the ultimate weapon as it went into space is also the reason behind meteorites still falling down and revealing to have Mega Stones within them, if you don't want to go through the idea of excessive energy around the meteorites, transforming them into Mega Stones. These meteorites may have substances similar to evolution stones, considering moonstones and their connection to the space Pokemon that are Clefairy, necessary as an evolution stone for them, and as such, it would not be entirely out of the realm of possibility for them to be created at will. The problem then is, how do you do that without the ultimate weapon? I mean, they have recreated smaller forms of the ultimate weapon, or even Devincorp has been able to harness similar power or methods to the ultimate weapon and its processes in doing so, as they know about infinite energy. But if you want to go dark with it, then you just need to control the life force of other Pokemon and imbue that energy in incredible amounts into a singular, relevant evolution stone. Need a Mega Steelixite? Just suck the souls out of 100 Steelix or Onix and slap them into a Mega Stone. Because while yes, not every Mega Pokemon that we see was there for the Great War, there likely are far more than we ever saw. Either way, their energy was harnessed and shifted away from their original purpose. And all that excess energy has to go somewhere, likely coalescing into Mega Stones or other evolutionary stones that may have been in space, you name it. From here, it will be very interesting to see if they try to give another way for Mega Stones to be created artificially without taking infinite energy from other Pokemon in excess within the future Legends EA game. But I have a feeling that's going to be a major plot point. Artificial Mega Stones. Rock fossils Pokemon have altered DNA. I love that I have the rock fossil behind me right now. That little my boy Helix. But it's an Ammonite fossil. So let's actually, you know what? I'm gonna go grab it. So this is an Ammonite fossil. It's a Helix fossil by all means, if you want to call it that, whatever. Real life, it is an Ammonite fossil, right? Genuine. And the fun thing about it is that we know you can't really revive anything. They just try to revive the dire wolves, and you can't really actually revive them because they're dead. DNA in general decays over time no matter what it is. So unless it's perfectly preserved, and even then, everything still breaks down, and you're not going to be able to take this and create a new exact copy of a past creature. With the direwolves, what they did was they took DNA from whatever else, matched it, and then adjusted through CRISPR and everything else that they did. I'm not an expert on it, so I'm not going to go in detail with it. And messed with basically the birth of the next creature, making them, 99% direwolf, essentially, as close to matching them as possible. So, yeah, sure, you did not revive direwolves, you just recreated them in a new light. Just like if you were to try to bring mammoths to life, or you were to try and bring any other creature back from the past. You're not gonna be able to do so. It's just gonna be a copy and one that is just closely resembling it. So what makes it different then for past Pokemon turning into fossils? I mean, even Aerodactyl is stated through its Mega form that even in its regular form, Aerodactyl said that it's not quite complete. But when it Mega evolves, it actually gains the rocky spikes on its body that were present on its body when it lived in the past. So we are not properly completing these ancient fossil Pokemon in the modern age. And we are likely reviving them with modern Pokemon energy. Different DNA, different energy than what it was in the past. As such, we can safely conclude that they have altered DNA. That all of our fossil Pokemon are not one-to-one replicas of what they once were in the past. I think the closest that we might actually get are any of the ones that do evolve, not Kabuto into Kabutops, but maybe Omanytes into Omastar. Reason being is very much like Aerodactyl, it seems to just change ever so slightly and seems to be more filled out. Seems to be a grown version of it. One that gets a heavier shell and is not able to hunt as well. It's not traditional evolution, maybe it was, but either way, you have a way for these Pokemon to not overpopulate the waters by becoming older and eventually passing away. It's a tricky subject, and I kind of covered it in full history of the world with fossil Pokemon video that I have, but again, I've said it in the last video, I kind of want to redo that one. Where is Surd? Surd, otherwise known as Sake, is one of the 3 beasts of Team Rocket in the Fire Red and Leaf Green arc of the Pokemon Adventures manga, and in the Diamond and Pearl arc, she was revealed to be one of the Team Galactic commanders. Surd has direct or indirect relation with all 4 main villainous teams from generations 1 to 4. She was part of both Team Rocket and Team Galactic, and she gave armor and a sword to both Archie and Maxie, the leaders of Team Aqua and Team Magma, respectively. Diamond and Pearl arc version of her reveals that she not only helped Archie or worked with Team Rocket as an undercover mission for her boss Cyrus in order to investigate about Pokemon from outer space, namely Jirachi or Deoxys. To fulfill her agendas, she selected a Team Galactic grunt and released him from the Team Galactic hive mind, implanting her will on him instead to carry out plans autonomously. This grunt became known as the Advanced Level Grunt, and inherited Surd's obsession with the Pokedex, which she developed after her first encounter with the Pokedex holders, which are your main characters. Following the petrification incident, which happened towards the end, she explains that Mewtwo chased her all the way back to Sinnoh out of revenge for the trainers she petrified, and she barely managed to escape its pursuit. Following this explanation, Riley appears and engages her in battle. She easily avoided all of its attacks and was able to escape along with the other commanders. Though within the Platinum arc, she is revealed to have released Darkrai into the Distortion World, having deemed herself as unable to control it. It is not known what happened to her following Team Galactic's defeat and disbandment. Real talk, there's really only 1 or 2 potential outcomes here. She might be dead. She has had way too many encounters with dangerous legendaries and mythical Pokemon. If she isn't dead from being hunted down even further by Mewtwo, whose psychic power can likely see around the world, considering how psychic Pokemon tend to work within the manga, even weaker ones, then she could have easily gone into hiding forever and just given up on everything, deeming everything too risky to continue, especially since her commander has fallen. Miyamoto's ghost reports. Miyamoto is the mother of Jesse and a former member of Team Rocket. She disappeared while on a mission to capture a Mew from Madame Boss and hasn't been heard from since. Miyamoto was an active duty Class A rocket. She was the first person to get tangible evidence of Mew, a recording that she took in the South American jungle. After filtering out all background audio, she was left with the faint cry of Mew. And the Madame Boss was like, hey, yo, can we put that on a CD and sell that? That sounds great. When she showed this recording to Madame Boss, she was sent on a mission to capture Mew. And Miyamoto was torn after having to leave Jesse behind, as she was still a child at the time. And thus, she carried a photo of Jesse with her at all times. While on her search through the Andes Mountains, Miyamoto got lost in a blizzard. The harsh weather suddenly broke, upon which Mew appeared before her. After she showed Mew a picture of Jesse, she tried to convince Mew to let her capture it, but Mew vanished and the blizzard returned. An avalanche started, and Miyamoto's scream was the last thing that was heard. Ever since, she was presumed dead. However, she still makes reports in the subsequent years, and Giovanni stated that her current whereabouts are unknown. As far as it is known, Miyamoto may still be looking for Mew. Yet even Giovanni can't seem to find her. What's interesting about this is it makes me wonder, knowing about Pokemon, if she was reborn as a Frostlass at any point. Because a woman who was lost in the mountains, frozen in the cold, that's the absolute basic story of Frostlass, as she is transformed into a Yukiona, and that is exactly what Frostlass is. Though Miyamoto, wanting to see Jesse, being sent on this mission and knowing she cannot return until she completes it, may still wander around as a ghost until she can complete her impossible mission. After all, she was a devoted rocket and the favorite of Madame Boss, who called her the ideal image of Team Rocket. Though she loved Jesse with all of her heart, a deep love. Knowing that she could not take care of her, she even put Jesse up for adoption and devoted herself to making money to then give to Jesse. What's interesting about this is that Miyamoto seems to be close to Madame Boss, taking orders directly from her and talking about their children together, because yes, Madame Boss is Giovanni's mother before the whole company was passed down to Giovanni. She often has to correct her boss though, when she goes on a tangent about the cost of missions or making easy money. So, when you have somebody who is so torn between two things that they love so much, their spirit may never rest, and that might be exactly what's happening to this day. Grimsley is dying. In Pokemon Black, White, and Black 2, White 2, Grimsley appears as the Elite Four trainer of Unova. He is the son of a distinguished family that fell into ruin. As a result, he developed a gambling addiction. Grimsley, having stepped down as an Elite Four member, reappears in Pokemon Sun, Moon, and Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon at Route 15, where he assists the player by registering Sharpedo into their Ride Pager. He also participates as a trainer in the Battle Tree, and in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Grimsley is an accomplished Mantine surfer, where he competes under the name Big G, and holds a high ranking on the leaderboards of all 4 islands' beaches before the player has a chance to beat the boards, or the record, sorry. He is noted to have developed skills for the sport surprisingly quickly, believing that it couldn't be much different from riding a Sharpedo. And according to an interview with Yusuke Omura in Nintendo Dream, Grimsley's design is themed on both vampires, specifically Dracula himself, and gambling. While his clothes are meant to look refined, the blue, black, and red color scheme is a reference to the colors of the roulette. When we look at his name, we get Ma, meaning devil or evil influence, and Gimon, meaning deception, deceit, or even the boogeyman. Now, in other words, what we're seeing here is that they decided to take Grimsley from his appearance in the original games, which seems to have full color blue hair, he seems young, so on and so forth, and transfer him into full white clothing with black hair. Maybe the bags under his eyes are a little bit more visible, all to the point where it seems like he's dying. Well, he's just supposed to resemble a vampire. And think about this. He could have absolutely perfect lighting, perfect clothing, and everything within the Elite Four, and still have had plenty of money, feeling comfortable, and so on, until he lost it all. travels the world, maybe eats a little bit less, maybe looks a little bit more gaunt, doesn't have the hair dye that he needs, and looks a little bit more pale all in all, as he arrives in Alola, where now the sun is constantly beating on him, and he is, again, modeled after a vampire, giving him that incredibly porcelain white skin that he has. So, he's not dying, he's just weird. I don't know how to end that, honestly. Cave of Being Hisui Connection. The Cave of Being, otherwise known as the Cave of Spirit, is a cavern in Unova located on Route 20. It is described as being connected to Sinnoh. Professor Juniper can be found inside here after the player has defeated the champion. If she is spoken to, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf will appear. They cannot be caught here, rather. Each Pokemon will travel to a different part of Unova, awaiting capture. The description of Cave of Being states, they say the deepest part of the cave leads to the Sinnoh region. And both the inside and outside of the cave are shaped like the Lake Guardian's caverns in Sinnoh. The 3 dry patches on the cave floor represent the 3 places in Sinnoh each Lake Guardian can be found, in Lake Acuity, Verity, and Valor. So I suppose this would be more of a connection to Sinnoh rather than Hisui, even though they're the same place. Though I'm very confused as to why it's specifically stated it has a connection to Hisui, and I could not find any additional leads on this one. Guzzlord was a Zygarde. Now, Reddit user Dialza actually posits the following, and it was actually pretty nicely put, so I will read directly from them. The details presented are as follows. They serve opposite roles. Guzzlord is eating a destroyed alternate Alola in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. Zygarde is a protector of nature in our world, which also does appear in Alola. Zygarde, Complete, and Guzzlord have many visual similarities. Multiple appendages, small top heads, large faces on their bodies, color scheme, generally bulky build. They're both Dragon-type Pokemon. In Sun and Moon, Guzzlord can be found in a cave that looks almost exactly like Zygarde's lair. To follow this, both Zygarde, Complete, and Guzzlord have enormous HP stats. Not much of a connection. They are constructed in opposite manners, though. Guzzlord eats everything and anything to grow larger, while Zygarde combines its own specific cells and cores to achieve its complete form. Guzzlord's Moondex entry specifically mentions that its droppings have never been found, suggesting all the matter it consumes simply makes it grow larger. Now, given all this information, I believe Guzzlord is an alternate world Zygarde, a mindless consuming force rather than a protector. However, one detail still sticks out. Ultra Sun Dex entry for Guzzlord reads as follows. Although it's alien to this world and a danger here, it's apparently a common organism in the world where it normally lives. This little bit of info may at first seem to contradict the theory, however, I would argue it does not. Instead of Guzzlord being an alternate world version of Zygarde Complete, I think Guzzlord is an alternate world version of a Zygarde cell. Also, note that in the Ultra Ruin, there's a man in a hazmat suit who explains his people have led to other planets, but he stayed back to keep an eye on Mr. Glutton. This suggests that Guzzlord is not the origin of the world's disaster, as the man refers to it fondly, and that for some reason, the people of that world care about protecting the Guzzlords. Plus, the man explains that the air in that world is toxic, which further suggests a different cause for the destruction of that world. And I will add, yes, Guzzlord doesn't really expel toxic chemicals at all. In fact, it just eats and eats and eats and can literally eat rivers, the ground, everything around it until there is nothing left. Now, the Reddit poster does posit the following. In this alternate Alola, some disaster was imminent, and for whatever reason, Zygarde was unable to become its complete form and prevent the disaster. When the calamity occurred, super volcanoes due to Maxi winning, Rayquaza being unable to stop Togekiss meteor, pollution running rampant, toxic gases spread all across the planet, making it uninhabitable. And again, I will add into this theory that yes, pollution did run rampant, as seen and understood through the anime, and even hints within the game itself. We get the idea that industrialization took over in Alola and the residents of Alola did not stop it. This would pollute the waters and the land itself, actually ruining nature as a whole. And through this, we have two different things that end up happening. One, less light from the Crozma was reaching these lands, meaning that Z-moves were already weakened. On top of that, the Guardians of Alola, our Tapus, all get their power from Alola. They literally have their signature moves being Nature's Wrath. And as such, if there's no nature to derive your power from, then there is no power to use. As such, the alternate world Tapu Koko is what brings in, or actually fights our Tapu Koko, and brings Ash and the gang, or rather Ash and Pikachu, into the ruined world. Now, back to their part of the theory. These gases corrupted the Zygarde cells and drove them to simply consume everything nearby. As they gathered more material, they attempted to create the complete form, but since they were not fusing with other Zygarde cells and simply eating garbage, they evolved into Guzzlords instead. These Guzzlord roam the ruined world, eating toxic debris along with everything else. In their own way, they're still helping clean up the world and protect nature by consuming all the toxic ruins. This cleanup and hope for an eventual return to their status as Zygarde cells is what drives the man in the Ultra Ruin to want to protect the Guzzlords and ensure they're left to continue their work safely. So, the only other problem here is that we do find, of course, many other Guzzlords, but if these Guzzlords are all still from Zygarde, it would make sense that there are multiple of them. This would just mean there are multiple other worlds or universes, islands, whatever it is that you might name, that are completely overrun by pollution. And now that Guzzlord's nature is to consume everything, being driven to do so due to its own personal world, when you get Guzzlords added into our world alongside any other Ultra Beasts, they act like a cornered animal. Think about if you were just dropped off in a random location. You're gonna lash out, you're gonna be scared, especially if a lot of people start crowding you because they're afraid of you. And if they start attacking, you're gonna fight back, otherwise you're afraid of dying because you don't understand them at all. So, theoretically speaking, there's a lot of ideas where Guzzlord is a mutated Pokemon, or was derived because of the effect of pollution in some capacity. I'm willing to believe that that is a possibility due to its traits and it being a Pokemon. As I've stated in many other videos, all Ultra Beasts are Pokemon. Pokeballs just have a hard time in lore finding the DNA that identifies them as Pokemon, allowing them to be put into a Pokeball as per a Pokemon's natural ability to do so. Mother and daughter appearances. And no, this isn't a generic mom and daughter, I mean, technically is, but this is literally their accredited names as they appear in multiple Pokemon movies and have no other explanation as to why they appear everywhere other than just being some sort of Easter egg, I suppose, which is really fun. The mother and daughter, otherwise directly translated as usual mother and daughter, are two minor characters who first appeared in the prologue of Lucario and the Mystery of Mew. Since then, they have made cameo appearances in many Pokemon movies. Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, they were reading the story of Rota to her daughter. The little girl insisted that her mother read the story again, which her mother accepted. In The Rise of Darkrai, they were seen traveling through Alamos Town when they were buying cotton candy from a man at a stand. They were seen again when Darkrai attacked several Pokemon in Town Square. In Giratina and the Sky Warrior, they were seen walking in a town while Zero attacked Ash and his friends with his Magnemite, Magneton, and Magnezone. They were seen walking past Ash and his friends during the ending credits for Arceus and the Jewel of Life. In Zoroark Massive Illusions, they were seen walking along the sidewalk behind Peg. In White, Victini and Zekrom, and Black, Victini and Reshiram, they were passed by Ash, Iris, and Sealand during the battle tournament in Eindhoek Town. They later witnessed the Sword of the Veil being lifted in the air. Kyurem versus the Sword of Justice, they appeared when Ash and his friends got off their train in Windy Station, and they were seen again in the end credits where Ash, Iris, and Sealand are seen eating ice cream on the bridge. In the ending credits of Genesect and The Legend Awakened, they were among the guests taking a tour of Pokemon Hills with Eric. Their hairstyles and outfit structure are very similar to that in Kyurem versus the Sword of Justice, but the colors of the outfits are completely changed. They made another appearance during the Mega Latias and Mega Latios journal in the Japanese version of XY episode 50, where they were seen riding a plane. This segment was later dubbed as part of the Mega Evolution Pokedex shorts. This marked their first appearance in the main series. They've infected the timelines, they're appearing everywhere now. In Hoopa and the Clash of Ages, they could be seen when they were evacuated from the time-space collapse via one of Hoopa's rings. Their hairstyles match the traditional designs, but their outfits are completely different, both structurally and color-wise. The pair appeared in Securing the Future among a crowd watching Hala on television. Their hair colors are noticeably different, black instead of brown hair for the mother, and brown instead of orange hair for the daughter. The daughter's shirt, while similar in structure and other appearances, is colored pink over white rather than yellow over pink, but they are still accredited as the usual mother and daughter. In the I Choose You trilogy, in I Choose You, which is set in a different continuity from the Pokemon the series, they were seen walking through an unknown town. Later, at the end of the film, they were seen sitting in a garden together with a Poochyena. In The Power of Us, they were seen by a veranda with a Bayleaf watching lanterns in the sky. In Secrets of the Jungle, they were seen walking around in Malifa Town. And then their other appearances include Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, where they're seen during the end credits, and in A Ripple in Time, they're seen passing Cynthia and her Garchomp. They are everywhere. I feel like when you sit down and you look at stuff like this, and you look at how things have changed, and like think about how Ash and all the different characters and the stories have changed, these are our continuity pieces of the universe. If they die, the entire universe falls apart. Everything will collapse. They are the pin that holds the Matrix together. Not really, of course, but it is really fun to think so, rather than just saying that they're, little Easter eggs. It's cute, it's fun. It's just a small little detail that's been otherwise completely overlooked by most people who probably watch the movies and shows. Togekiss's Dex entry spoils the Volo battle. This one's a little confusing, as the following is the only information regarding the Dex for Togekiss from Pokemon Legends Arceus. Scant few have ever cited this Pokemon. After studying what literature remains, I am certain Togekiss will reveal itself when peace reigns in the land. Which doesn't necessarily spoil the Volo fight, even though I swear I had found something that showed that we'd fight Volo through Togekiss's info myself, but I can't relocate that. The only other hints we get are through the following and lead us to a different theory for the fun of it. Volo's Pokemon usage is similar to Cynthia's from her appearance in Pokemon Platinum. His main companion and partner appears to be his Togepi, who he uses in battle against a player in every fight, evolving into a Togekiss by the time they fight him for the last time. Cynthia not only uses a Togekiss in her champion fight in Platinum, but is known to provide the player with a Togepi egg. In his second battle, he also uses a Gibble, which later evolves into a Garchomp, with it also appearing to be his second main companion and partner, a parallel to Cynthia's own. 5 of the 6 Pokemon in Volo's party are shared with the champion, with Hisui and Arcanine replacing the unavailable Melodic, which is a shame. Now, even if we consider the Lucario and Togekiss, their lore, and how they only align themselves with those who are pure of heart, we have some possible explanations. One being that he was delusional and was truly in belief that he could recreate the world and do so in a better fashion than Arceus did. This would be his pure heart that is required to be a partner of these Pokemon, or alternatively, the Togekiss and Lucario simply were treated right by Volo, and there is the chance that they may have seen the strife between the Diamond and Pearl clans and may have seen this as the correct course of action in order to attain true peace. All of this is just honestly making me want to cover a video on Volo and time travel within the franchise and multidimensional travel and so much more. I'm going to put it on the list. Tup voice based on Jesse Pinkman. Tup, otherwise known as Tupper, is a recurring character in the Pokemon the series. He is a member of Team Skull who often appears alongside Zip and Rap and acts as the leader of the trio. According to Billy Bob Thompson, Tup's English voice is based on Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad. There's nothing else to explain there. Team Skull has Jesse Pinkman and Usain Bolt. It's dumb, and I love Team Skull so much. Scrapped new Jinx form. This is something that we do very much know is true thanks to the Terra leak that did occur. Turns out that Jinx almost had a more powerful Mega Evolution form in Pokemon X and Y. The art in the leaks depicts Mega Jinx as somewhat similar to her base form, but now she boasts longer, wavier hair, sunglasses, and a blue dress. The reason for it being scrapped was because they decided they didn't want to risk an outburst similar to when Jinx was first created, due to its appearance. In all reality, Jinx is probably never going to get touched again in regards to Megas or Evolutions or anything, despite it being seen by many people as part of the trio that does include Electabuzz and Magmar. And just so that people understand, the ideas behind Jinx was through Gyaru fashion and through some Viking inspiration. This is all due to, well, again, Gyaru. When you look at Gyaru, it was supposed to be a fashion that was supposed to make Japanese people stand out. And every country does have different backgrounds to them. In the case of Japan, they never, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, never did blackface, which is what the problem is here. Negative depictions of black people. And as such, when we look at Jinx and its Gyaru attachments, the Gyaru was supposed to be a, yes, darkening of the skin through darker makeup and then changing your hair to be blonde in color. This is because the stereotype for Japanese people is that what? You have lighter skin and you have darker hair. So to stand out, you do the exact opposite. And as such, it was also seen as attractive, to stand out, to be a rebel, you name it. So that's the basis of Jinx. But when it got brought here or brought out to Western audiences who have a different history and background, yes, you can see why people would think it was something very negative. Who sealed Regigigas? This one goes way deeper than I expected. Regigigas is an extremely skilled craftsman. Long ago, it created 5 golems in its image and brought them to life. It used ice, rocks, magma, a cluster of electric energy, and a crystallized dragon energy to create these golems. They'd be known as the legendary Pokemon Regice, Regirock, Registeel, Regieleki, and Regidrago. Regigigas is also capable of controlling these legendary giants even if they already belong to a trainer. It can also survive extreme conditions as it is able to work with the boiling temperatures of magma as well as frigid ice. When Regigigas is disturbed from its slumber, it goes on a rampage and shoots powerful beams of energy. When it is befriended, however, it'll become a calm and gentle giant. According to an enduring Sinnoh legend, after it created the legendary giants, Regigigas pulled land masses together and binded them with ropes to create the regions of the Pokemon world. At some point, Regigigas fell into a deep sleep inside the Snow Point Temple. To reawaken it, one must unlock the door to the chamber where Regigigas is sealed in. So that leaves the question of who sealed Regigigas. Now, you might think we can't assume the same people who sealed the other Regis sealed Regigigas because they're in entirely different regions and were already incredibly feared by the public. But you'd be wrong. Well, we'd both be wrong, because that's what I thought. Now, let's look at Snow Point Temple's information. In Sinnoh's distant past as Hisui, the Snow Point Temple is at the far northern end of the Alabaster Islands above the Pearl Settlement. Its layout is almost inverted from its Sinnoh counterpart. It has 5 floors high, including the rooftop, and has 1 basement level. The temple has puzzles involving observing the statues of the legendary giants arranged in specific patterns around the floor. So whoever made the temple, whoever sealed Regigigas, because you cannot open those doors without messing with those statues, is also aware of the other giants. We could assume in Hoenn that the legendary giants were sealed by the Draconids, one of the few groups of humanity that has existed in Pokemon lore for the longest, alongside Celestica people, AZ's bloodline, and descendants of the fallen Unovan Kingdom. They reside within Hoenn, which is also where we find the Regi-Trio sealed away. Though, what's also interesting is that considering they have a lore keeper for Rayquaza and the Super Ancient Trio, what stories do the Draconids hold of the other legendaries and mythicals that we haven't been made aware of because they don't worship them? They are called the Draconids after all. They worshipped, dragons? I mean, who knows? Maybe when we lost Aster, we lost lore and every other mythical legendary, since Rayquaza just refuses to talk to Zinnia and flat out hates her in every capacity, ruining her life at every turn, whether that be mentally, physically, spiritually, or even financially, as he just steals her wallet and just bops her off the tower. Bye! Goodbye, Zinnia. Like, I know that's an exaggeration, but seriously, what lore could there be? And when we look into this further, with Rayquaza, you can learn or have it learn Dragon Ascent from Zinnia's grandmother or some random red shirt dude in Seafolk Village in Alola. No other people can teach it, so there has to be a connection here, especially as Seafolk Village is basically a place where people will sail from all over, meaning that that person is more than likely a Draconid. And that's way too much of a coincidence considering the Dragon Totem Pokemon is also on that Island. Now, I digress. It is most likely that the Draconids were the reason behind the sealing of the Regis, which would potentially imply that they have been to Sinnoh and Galar while using Seafolk Village as a resting spot along the way. I'm just gonna have to make a video on the history of the Regis and Draconids or something at some point, because there's way more to go to in detail that would take me easily another hour or two, and I'm not doing that in the Iceberg video, so another one goes to the list. Sandy Shocks is an alien from Reddit user Indiozia. I love Sandy Shocks. It's giving Magneton ferrofluid hair to resemble a caveman that walks around on 2 giant horseshoe magnets. Completely absurd, or is it? Yes, it is, but that's what makes it great. And taking into account how Magnemite is shown to have existed during the Kalos War 3,000 years before X and Y, it's a surprisingly believable ancestor. The implication is that its legs atrophied as it began to rely on levitating, and that the iron firelings it attracts solely became part of its genetic makeup, replacing its ground type with steel. Today, I came to a realization that makes it even better, and it mainly hinges on the 2 in-game sources of information about this Pokemon. Violet Pokedex. It slightly resembles a Magneton that lived for 10,000 years and was featured in an article in a paranormal magazine. A culture magazine states, Sandy Shocks, a Magneton with a 10,000-year lifespan? Some scientists claim that this mysterious being is a Magneton that has lived for 10,000 years. It has been sighted numerous times in Paldea's more arid regions, but there are no reports of it ever having been caught. It's said that Sandy Shocks is an aggressive sort, and that some people who've seen it have been attacked as well. It takes its name from a beast with a matching description in the era-defining Scarlet Book. The part I'm focusing on is Magneton that lived for 10,000 years. That backstory is dubious at best, but let's humor the magazine's writers and imagine it's true. Or at least try to see how they came to such a conclusion. Many Pokemon are based on yokai, a broad term encompassing a huge variety of supernatural entities and phenomena in Japanese mythology and folklore. One type of yokai are the Oni, which originally referred to ghosts or souls of the dead, but gradually changed to include a whole range of different creatures. The most generic kind being an ogre or demon-like humanoid. Oni are a common source of inspiration among yokai-based Pokemon, including the Electabuzz line, Glalie, Araquanid, its Japanese name is Onishizukumo, which Shizukumo. The protrusions on its head resemble horns, and its shiny gives it a red Oni, blue Oni dynamic. You have Grimmsnarl, Skullvillain, Ogerpon, oh my girl Ogerpon, and then of course, now we have Sandy Shocks. While Sandy Shocks' wild, spiky hair is obviously supposed to evoke a caveman, it also brings to mind an Oni, especially the middle Magnemite's hair looking very similar to that of the more cartoonish depictions of Oni. Besides gray and black, the most prominent colors in Sandy Shocks' design are red, blue, and yellow, which are basically the Oni colors. Red or blue for their skin, yellow for their clothes. Each Sandy Shock or Magnemite has 1 eye, and guess how many eyes the first written example of an Oni had? Yes, the first story to portray Oni as their own creatures rather than mere souls of the dead was about an Oni with just a single eye. And like Electabuzz, Sandy Shocks is electric type, as Oni are often associated with thunder and lightning. So what does this have to do with Sandy Shocks supposedly coming to be after 10,000 years? Well, that part is based on how some animals are said to become yokai upon reaching a certain age. Cats that live long enough to become Nekomata, bears become Onikuma, turban snails become Sazeoni after exactly 30 years, and so on. Notice how those last 2 both have Oni in their names? That's right! The idea behind Sandy Shocks isn't just a caveman themed around the technology of today, but also a Magneton turned yokai after too many years spent in this world, abruptly transforming into a scarier, more aggressive Oni version of itself, like a cat's tail splitting in 2 to signify its conversion into a Necromata, a bear suddenly growing larger and walking on 2 legs upon becoming an Onikuma, or the turban snail developing magical powers as it transitions into a Sazeoni on its 30th birthday. And so that is the conclusion of their theory, and I'm not gonna lie, I agree with it. I've read enough on Oni thanks to Ogerpon and looking into their past, their abilities with electricity, and looking at, even if it wasn't necessarily Oni, we look at, again, a lot of animals that, even in other cultures, once they live for a long time, or if they are the original animal, they tend to have elemental abilities. And if we really want to go that extra mile, then sure, even if a regular Magneton did live for 10,000 years, there's a very good chance that it is going to develop additional abilities, or for some reason have collected something upon its body to show that it has aged. So as for the Oni being a strong inspiration for why Magneton and Sandy Shocks are actually related, or rather Magnemites and all of them being related in some capacity, I'm in. I'm down for it. Because then that means, theoretically speaking, that if a Magneton lives long enough and doesn't become a Magnezone, that it instead could become a Sandy Shocks. Trey, Troy, and Hillary are canon. A sneak peek at Pokemon is an English language promotional video cassette issued in limited quantities in the United States to Nintendo Power subscribers and Toys R Us customers during the summer of 1998, prior to the debut of the Pokemon franchise in the country. The video was a teaser for many elements of the franchise, most notably the animated TV show Pokemon The Series. In addition to footage, the video also included live action footage of exclusive characters said to be friends and family of the show's main cast. The release has since been posted by fans on YouTube and other video streaming sites. This goes even further than just saying Trey and Troy, who are Ash's cousins, and Hillary is his aunt, but also that Mr. Carlson is his actual science teacher, and Amy is truly Misty's best friend, making them all theoretically canonical. There's nothing more to say, it's just weird, and this is something that has haunted me since I released my video explaining every single Pokemon professor, and yes, there are more than 9. There's like 100 out there. Pokemon Stars. According to a thread on Reddit that I was able to parse through, rumors stated that Pokemon Stars was just a codename for putting Sun and Moon on the Switch as a proof of concept. Apparently, they were testing it and seeing how much work it would be to get the engine on the Switch. The idea here being that the rumor came about because Nintendo truthfully were experimenting with the recent Pokemon games on the Switch, but that in itself doesn't imply they were definitely going to release it. Doing a quick internal test of the port of Sun and Moon to the Switch, then having a team working on added story elements for Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. There was definitely enough happening that even people well in the know could have mistakenly thought that Stars was an official release target for the Switch as part of that as a trilogy. That might have even been the plan before changing Stars into Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon on the 3DS. Celebi is meant to be Kokopelli. This is one I've actually researched and explained in my complete legendary mythical family tree, so I'll explain a little bit of it here. And Kokopelli is supposed to be about fertility and the land and everything else, and even past designs kind of seem to make it look a little bit more like Kokopelli. The problem is that the modern version of Kokopelli is nothing like the original intended version, and often ends up actually insulting the understanding or the worship of Kokopelli. So again, if you want to know the actual full story, which will take me like a good 30 minutes to go through probably here, go watch that. It's also a really long video, so you can go sleep to it, like I know many of you do. Xerneas prevented a Weather-Trio Meteorite. This one actually caught me by surprise, as I was immediately excited due to thinking that this actually ties in, and it does, into new Pokemon Snap and Xerneas' role there. Xerneas is one of the Illumina Pokemon, a group of Pokemon who saved the region from a meteorite 2,000 years ago. It also believed, or is believed, to be the originator of the Illumina phenomenon and the very first Illumina Pokemon. It resides in the Oris Island Illumina spot. Why this is huge is because of something we have mentioned. Every 1,000 years, Kyogre and Groudon rise up and wreak havoc, whatever, upon the land and the sea. It's just in their nature to do so and reshape the planet. And guess who else we find in these lands? Jirachi. So it all comes full circle. Where else does this go, though? Unknown, considering the history of the island is kind of lost. So I don't know, maybe when I cover the ecology of Pokemon Snap one day, I'll be able to talk about it. But for now, it kind of just gets to sit here with a big old question mark on it. Pinkan Island sea monster. There is a map that is shown in the anime that is very reminiscent of old style maps that always had a little sea monster in the corners. And of course, on this map, we see in the upper left corner, a twisty little sea serpent that looks nothing like any other Pokemon. Or you could interpret it as like being a little curly snake and has horns and frills along the back. Like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this one. And in fact, I'll just give you something fun as to why maps were likely decorated with monsters on them. One, being hazards. If you see a sea monster on your map, you're told immediately, unconsciously, hey, don't go there. You can also put it at the edges of the map to signify the unknown or the danger of the unknown. What's fun about sea monsters, though, is that the way that many of them are described, even the Loch Ness monster itself, matches up with the way that whale penises look. I am not showing that on the screen, not even for educational purposes here. You can do that on your own. It is funny, though. Shamudi Island treasures are Mega Stones. During the events of Movie 2, Pokemon 2000, Ash and the gang arrive at Shamudi, otherwise known as Earthia Island. As depicted in The Power of One, Shamudi and its surrounding islands, Fire, Ice, and Lightning Island, are connected to the balance of nature via the legendary Pokemon Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos, and their mediator, Lugia. Every year, Shamudi Island holds the annual Legend Festival. For centuries, the locals have performed a ceremony honoring the prophesied Chosen One that would tame the birds of legend should they release their might on the world. The locals dress up in traditional attire, apparently for historical purposes, but some in the younger generation attribute the preservation effort to resulting tourism. According to Professor Oak, ancient writings from many different cultures name the area around this region as the source of all the waters of the world and perhaps life itself, which is something we mentioned earlier. When we look at what their treasures look like, they're orbs, sure, but the inside of them move, similar to how plasma might move and shift, just slower. Whereas when we look at Mega Stones, they are more solid, similar to how marbles look on the inside. So while I don't think they're Mega Stones, I would be all in for them becoming Mega Stones in future games or reiterations of the story. Imagine if you would, one day, that with all these different concepts and old ideas that the Orange Islands gets brought back, and Pokemon can capitalize on all these unexplained concepts or even expand on them, because the Orange Islands has so much lore and strange information within them. After all, they added Mega Evolution to the Mewtwo fight with Red. They could just add a little bit of extra fun without truly changing anything with the development of the franchise. Let the birds have Megas. They fused before in the manga. They have regional variants. Fans love them. Just give them a Mega form. Why not? Lusamine won in Anabel's home universe. Anabel, otherwise known as Lila, was the Frontier Brain in charge of running the Battle Frontiers Battle Tower under the title of Salon Maiden, otherwise known as Tower Tycoon, actually. In Generation 7, Anabel is an international police officer working with Looker. Also, before I continue, since we mentioned the Battle Frontier, we could actually speak about a theory that was brought up last time regarding the inevitable Chatelaine Faller. Thank you to the comments as you theorized that since Ingo and Anabel were Fallers and heads of their special battle frontiers, that one of the Chatelaine sisters are inevitably supposed to become a Faller in a future game. It's bold to state, as you stated, that it was inevitable as per the original theory title, but it actually does make sense. Now, as for why Anabel would be from a universe in which Lusamine succeeded, it's likely because not only does she know quite a bit about Ultra Beasts in the manga, but she specifically knows about how Cosmog becomes Solgaleo Lunala, and how a massive wormhole created by, as she directly says, the Blinding One was brought about. Here's the kicker. Why does she know about the Blinding One? Because from what I could quickly find, even the Ultra Recon Squad seemed to be working alongside Lusamine, freely or forced, as they tried to bring her to Ultra Megalopolis and confront Necrozma, or even capture it for her own means. So they would likely not be talking to Anabel. Even then, Necrozma is often just simply called Necrozma until it reaches its Ultra form. Yet Anabel proceeds to call a creature she would otherwise know nothing about the Blinding One. My proposal is then this. Anabel, who was in the original Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald games, would have been from a universe alternate to the ones in which Mega Pokemon exist. And considering that she is known to have lost her memory after a considerable amount of time in Ultra Space, which is compounded further with the Ultra Beasts aggressively seeking her out as a faller, we know she has to come from an alternate universe. As such, we can imagine the following. Anabel is an incredibly skilled Pokemon trainer. After all, she is the Battle Tower leader and is known to have been brought into the International Police, only to rise up the ranks rapidly over her time there. In fact, she is Luker's superior, having been found by him and Nanu in Alola many years ago originally. What this likely means is that before she came to the Sun and Moon timeline, she was from the non-Mega timeline within Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, where due to her position, she likely was involved with international or nationwide incidents at the least. And if her current career in this timeline says anything about her skill as a person and a trainer, then she may have even been a chief of the International Police in her home universe. She gets brought in to stop Lusamine, but unfortunately she gets flown into Alola too late. It's at this point that once she lands on Alola and is able to fall through the wormholes, Lusamine has already been long lost to Nihilego, or even managed to gain control to some capacity over Necrozma in its true Blinding Light form, or at least brought the Blinding Light form to fruition. And there's a problem with this. If Ultra Necrozma exists, then the multiverse is being ripped open. I am willing to believe, because of this, that there is only one true Necrozma, and considering how Necrozma seems to just throw Lusamine and Guzma back from Ultra Space, back into our world, within the Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon games, then it may actually know who they are. Now, I will note, yes, I understand I am mixing the manga and games together, but considering we have already hit multiversal levels of plot, we need to consider the other forms of media to fill out our story, especially as Anabel seems to have a fairly consistent life, consistent skills, and consistent personality throughout the different forms of media we find her in, with exception to some capacity, the main series anime. Back to Anabel in her original universe though, she likely witnessed many of the Ultra Beasts that were coming out, destroying things, and also witnessing Ultra Necrozma itself, seeing the Blinding One in its full glory. Though there is a major issue even with that, as being near Ultra Necrozma when it's mentally unstable will end in death. Necrozma, at its full power, Ultra form, radiates energy that has all sorts of effects on living beings and even nature itself. Its body temperature exceeds 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 5,540 Celsius. Anything that it touches will melt from extreme heat. It can fire laser beams from every part of its body, and these lasers can reach over 18 miles away, burning through everything in their path. While swinging its four wings around, Ultra Necrozma uses its superheated claws to tear its opponents to shreds. In this form, it is known as the Blinding One, due to its brilliant appearance. As seen in the episode The Prism Between Light and Darkness, when Ultra Necrozma uses up all of its light, it reverts to its lightless form and enters into a slumber, unless it absorbs more light. That last part may explain why Necrozma is back to its Prism form as we see it, meaning, as it was rampaging, more wormholes opened up. The light it shines, its body temperature, everything is so deadly as it's using so much incredible energy in rampaging as people are coming after it. The Recon Squad, Lusamine, the Aether Foundation of Anabel's home world, that it may have flat out killed them all. Guzma. Everybody. Now, Anabel miraculously survives. Necrozma loses its light as it runs out of energy, as Anabel then falls into our timeline, into Alola, and we know the storyline from there. And that was just a quick and dirty research. Now, again, Multiverse Travelers, they're getting their own video, and we're going to move on to the next theory. Coliseum Beasts were cloned. I only include this part at this point because I spent 30 minutes, nearly an hour, digging through easily 100 different theories and reading up on a number of the admins within Pokemon Coliseum just to find out that Ho-Oh pops up at the end of the game and just looks at them, likely ready to raise flames upon the admins for turning its beloved beasts into shadow Pokemon. Like the real Ho-Oh, not Shadow Ho-Oh. Because yes, I know at some point they have, XD Gale of Darkness, Shadow Lugia. But I'm going to tell you right now, Ho-Oh absolutely loves Lugia. They are two sides of the same coin, a family even. So I propose to you this, considering there is no evidence of the beasts being clones, and it would actually tie into their story as a regular lore piece. Lugia waits for a person with a pure heart to bring them back to Johto proper. Meanwhile, all three of the beasts created by Ho-Oh search for a trainer with a pure heart. This is not a coincidence, as Lugia and Ho-Oh used to perch on the Bell and Brass Tower together in unity before the events that burned the tower that Lugia resided on. The Beasts get revived after their death and are sent out to bring Lugia home with the right person. Along the way, as they travel along the world, they get caught by the antagonists of Pokemon Coliseum until they are eventually rescued and Ho-Oh brings fiery pain upon those monsters. Plumeria's parent founded Team Skull. This one took me a little bit, and a much better put together version was brought to you by Dario Pignon on Reddit. The first thing that made me think of this theory was that Plumeria gives you the Poisonium Z. The only characters besides trial captains and kahunas who give you Z crystals are Mullane, who used to be a captain, Guzma, who wanted to be a captain and so hoarded Beginnium Z that he had Team Skull Grunts steal, and Plumeria, for whom there is no explanation as to how she got it. If one of her parents had been a kahuna, she would have had access to Z crystals. Speaking of kahunas, in one of the trailers in Route 13, where you can find Plumeria in the post-game, a Team Skull Grunt tells you that Team Skull formed around one of the old kahunas, who was later smacked down by the Tapu. I'm guessing this person was one of Plumeria's parents who used their position as kahuna to aid in their criminal activities. They lived in the mansion in Po Town and built a wall around the town to keep out the police and the Tapu, who were angry that the kahuna was misusing their power. But Nanu, who was in Alola on his Ultra Beast mission, helped them infiltrate Po Town and arrest the leader of Team Skull, after which Tapu Bulu made Nanu the new kahuna. Supporting this is the room in the Po Town mansion that is implied to belong to Plumeria, since it contains her makeup and the TM for Sludge Bomb. It could be that she called dibs on that room when Team Skull took over the abandoned mansion, or it could be that she had lived there from the beginning. It could also explain her sharing Guzma's dissatisfaction with the Kahuna captain system if she saw her parent become corrupt after being chosen by the Tapu. There's also what she says when giving you the Poisonium Z. Be kind to Pokemon or you'll bring about the wrath of the Tapu. She would have experience with this if it happened to her parent. Also, she says when challenging the league in the post-game that Mullane and Nanu convinced her to do it. It's possible that they both came to know her through her parent, with Nanu being the one who arrested them, and Mullane having been appointed captain by them. And I do agree with this theory all in all. We don't get any real explanation as to why she has Poisonium Z, and it's kind of filled out through our understanding of it. It also explains how Po Town, how I've always thought it, wasn't actually fully taken over. It was just abandoned. I feel like if they really wanted to, people could absolutely retake Po Town very easily. So why haven't they? It's because that's just what it was. It was created into that by an old kahuna, Plumeria's parent. And that's why, right before we come in there, that kahuna is taken away, and they haven't begun the efforts to take down Po Town and revamp it, to bring life back into it, because Team Skull is still living in the corpse of that town that was destitute and meant for criminal activity only, waiting for the day that it gets disbanded, which happens by the end of the games, and for Po Town to be revitalized as a proper part of Alola and its culture. Jesse is from Littleroot Town. Upon arriving at Littleroot Town's port in Hoenn alone, Jesse indicated that she had been to the town sometime before and referred to it as the city whose colors will never change, though she didn't elaborate further. Her past connection to Hoenn was again hinted in the episode All Things Bright and Beautyfly, when Jesse was revealed to have an expired Hoenn contest pass. These are small things, but at the same time she had to come from somewhere. There's a lot of history to Team Rocket overall, and I don't quite know if this is conclusive, but this might be the closest we get to understanding where she is from, because her expired contest pass would definitely mean that she is not from any of the regions prior to Hoenn. She was even part of a biker gang in Kanto, which she may have earned her way up that ladder while doing high-speed wheelies down the cycling path in Hoenn in her youth, which is meant to be an incredibly fast area or fast way to travel through Hoenn, and she was just likely biking in circles around the people in Kanto. Lots of possibilities, and if I ever get to cover Team Rocket's history as the lovable trio that they are, they truly deserve their own video. For our semi-finale, we have Rotom being originally a legendary Pokemon. In Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Brilliant Diamond, and Shining Pearl, Rotom uses Battle, legendary Pokemon, as its battle theme, even though Rotom is not a legendary Pokemon. To date, Rotom is the only Pokemon with this trait. This is what ticked everything and allowed these dominoes to fall and people to think that it may be a legendary. Now, Rotom is not a legendary. It doesn't even match the base stat totals if you want to go mechanically. Also, it can have eggs of it, so that is also disqualifying it from the legendary status. But every other piece of it is understandable as to why it could be deemed a legendary, or at least something with incredible story or impact on the world of Pokemon, because that's what legendaries are. Legendary Pokemon are the first to do something. They are ones that have had incredible impact on the history of Pokemon, you name it. And Rotom lived within the old chateau. While being there, the only way you could encounter it was through special events. And even when you did, you got to listen to this music. It was a unique typing, and eventually it would have multiple different forms that it could take, which only complicated the process or the ideas behind it being a legendary. So while it seems like it could have been a legendary, and theoretically speaking, you can go one way or another, it is officially not a legendary, even though I think at one point it was also coded to be a legendary, but that was a mistake, admittedly. It is not a legendary, but it's fun. And for our grand finale, Pokemon XY Alien Plotline. The scrapped plotline of Pokemon X and Y, commonly referred to as the XY Files, talks about a 4chan leak concerning scrapped information on Pokemon X and Y, including story, mechanics, characters, and Pokemon. 4chan leaks are not normally to be trusted, as anyone can just throw on information and call it a leak and call it real. We still see that to this day on YouTube and everywhere else. That's why I don't like leaks. But at the same time, there's a lot of interesting coincidences across the board that have been theorized about before reading into these files. The original plot of Pokemon X and Y had much more of a focus on aliens and space. Team Flare was intended to be much more alien, being aliens that posed as Men in Black-like characters that slowly took over Kalos and hunted for AZ. AZ's Floette held the key, or rather flower, to a doomsday weapon set on destroying the Earth. The ultimate goal of Team Flare. The newly introduced Fairy type was also intended to play a role in the plot, as most Fairy type Pokemon were intended to be aliens from the moon. Later in development, this plot was deemed strange and was later scrapped in favor for more mystical fairy tale-like elements. However, even this was scrapped to make development time for 3D models. Let's start with the mechanics. The group of friends, Tierno, Shauna, and Trevor, were originally intended to showcase a mechanic known as teams. Players would be able to combine, quote-unquote, their stats such as battles won, Pokemon caught, and so on, with other players online. The group of friends were intended to be an in-game version of this, but the mechanic was scrapped, so they were changed to be the players' rivals. Mega Evolution and Mega Stones were also of alien origin, being part of a spaceship that AZ used to get to Earth. The designs were originally much more alien and played on DNA elements. More Mega Pokemon were planned, but the amount of them was scaled down as it was worried that the large amount would cheapen the mechanic, and it was unknown how the mechanic would be received by fans. The concept of riding Pokemon was planned as a way to test the player's interactions with 3D maps. Skiddo and Go-Go were designed for this purpose, and riding Pokemon were intended to completely replace the bike, but it was considered difficult due to the amount of Pokemon. So the mechanic of riding Pokemon was only used for Skiddo and Rhydon in the final version. Pokemon of different sizes was intended to be a mechanic among all Pokemon, however this was scrapped as it would possibly change gameplay and graphics too much. It was later set exclusively to the Pumpkaboo line. Lysander and Professor Sycamore, this one's a fun one, were originally intended to be one character with a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde style of personality. The Professor had been exposed to a space rock sometime before the events of X and Y. He would act normally in a more professional, professor-like fashion mostly, but would turn into a more malicious character whenever the leader of Team Flare controlled him due to this space rock exposure. AZ was intended to be an alien similar to Team Flare, sent to take over Kalos and destroy the Pokemon world. However, he had a change of heart upon meeting the Eternal Flower Floette. After this change to peace, he was exiled to Earth, wandering and aging slower than the humans of the Pokemon world. Diantha was intended to be the benevolent leader of the Fairy-type Pokemon, looking after Pokemon that had come from the moon. Whether she still had the status of Kalos champion is actually unknown. Meanwhile, Valerie's design, the Fairy-type gym leader, was intended to be an old design for Diantha when the alien plotline was still present, giving her a stranger appearance with dark eyes and wing-like clothing. This design was later repurposed into her role as a gym leader. One of the ideas around the gym leaders would be that they would all be themed around different sports activities. Karina, fighting type, Grant, rock type, were the only characters to keep this theme in the final version. Some scrapped concepts were Grass Gym Leader, who rode on a go-goat like a rodeo cowboy, and an Ice-type Gym Leader who rode an Avalugg like a surfboard. Pertaining to this, Ramos and Wolfric seem to build off of the original cowboy and surfer concepts in their designs to some capacity. Clement and Bonnie were actually swapped, but with Clement being the younger brother, it was a little too similar to Trevor as the other character that commonly supported us throughout our journey, and so they were swapped. Alexa was originally intended to be a ghost-type gym leader, capturing paranormal Pokemon with her camera, and was originally more involved in the plot due to her fascination with the paranormal. Ghost was deemed too difficult as a first gym battle, so she was changed to specialize in bug-type Pokemon. That would have been so cool. I would have been all in on a paranormal investigator gym leader ghost gym. That'd be sick. Olympia, the psychic gym leader, was one of the last gym leaders designed, originally playing a bigger role in the plot with Team Flare and the legendaries. Her design was also originally more androgynous, but she was later made more feminine. And it would explain why she has the capacity to see the future and derives her power from the stars, and is very much a human version of the Gothitelle line. It's because she was supposed to have this incredible attachment to the plotline. Speaking of legendaries though, Xerneas and Yveltal were of alien origin, being the source of a weapon intended to destroy Earth rather than a power source, like in the final version. Their colors were even originally swapped, with Xerneas being red and Yveltal being blue, though this was swapped as red as a primary version color was already done with Pokemon Red and Blue and Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Meanwhile, Zygarde was one of the last Pokemon implemented and was intended to be an event Pokemon that would be later distributed. However, this event concept was scrapped, as they deemed it difficult to keep it a secret due to data mining and the internet age. Good job. The Fennekin line was originally intended to be much more feminine throughout the evolution line, but this was also scrapped, with Braixen remaining largely the same from this idea though. They were also originally intended to be Fire Fairy, but it was decided that a new type would offset the balance of the starters, so it was changed to Fire Psychic instead. Pain. Also, I don't know how you make it more feminine. They feel fairly feminine, but also we've seen what people get upset about with feminine designs of Pokemon. To follow this though, Chestnut was planned to be Grass Steel, possibly trying to balance things when Delphox was Fire Fairy, but it was later changed to Grass Fighting. Imagine its signature move, the Spiky Shield, being a Steel-type move instead. That would have actually made a lot of sense, especially considering its connections and thoughts, or rather its Dex, exclaiming how its second form tends to be something that doesn't feel any pain because it has such a hard shell. And then when it finally evolves into its final form, then yeah, it's compared to a full-on tank. That makes perfect sense. But allow me to, if you're not enraged a little bit, or at least like sitting here going, oh, what could have been in a, I'm not going to say nostalgic sense, but I think you get what I mean. The Flabebe line originally had more plant elements besides the flower and were fairy grass, oh my goodness, type Pokemon. Floette was also designed before Flabebe, and Florges was originally intended to be a single, unevolving Pokemon that acted as AZ's signature Pokemon. This was changed in order to advertise the fairy type more. It's such a big difference to think Florges could have been its whole other Pokemon. How there could have been more flowers and plants on them. It would have been a little awkward, the fact that they weren't related, but I guess that's where the designs would have differed, hopefully a lot more, to separate those pieces. Now, Sylveon acted as a testing ground for the fairy type when a new type was being conceptualized to balance the dragon type. The original design was much more fairy-like, having wings, but these were changed to ribbons as to not confuse it for a flying type Pokemon, which is understandable. Meanwhile, another flying type Pokemon, Hawlucha, its design was originally much more humanoid, which I do not like the idea of. Somewhat suggesting it was a human in a Pokemon-like costume. I definitely do not like that. Though this was changed to have its wrestler elements implemented onto itself. And I love Hawlucha, so I'm happy that they went with that final design. Meanwhile, the Gloomy line were originally Dragon Water-type Pokemon, having a more liquid and transparent appearance. This would have matched really well with the fact that, I wonder what they are. Oh yeah, they're gastropods, they're slugs. But this was changed due to the large amount of Water-type Pokemon. Meanwhile, the Noibat line was originally conceptualized during the previous generation as the region's bat Pokemon. However, this role was taken by the Woobat line. The design of Noibat was liked among the designers, so it was changed and added as a new Pokemon for Pokemon X and Y. Meanwhile, Diancie was truly intended to be an evolution of Carbink, though this was scrapped around the same time Zygarde was made into a base game legendary rather than an event Pokemon. They needed a Pokemon to fill in this gap, so Diancie's design was changed and made into a mythical Pokemon. And finally, we have elements that were then used in future games or how they were changed in lore for this one. Mega Evolution was intended to play more DNA-like elements. This could possibly be referenced in Oris's Delta episode, where Mega Evolution and Deoxys, a Pokemon whose design resembles DNA, play a role. And I've always suspected that Mega Evolution messes with the DNA of a Pokemon, starting with Aerodactyl as a very good example of that. The entire plot of Aliens in Space is similar to the plot in Generation 7 games and possibly Generation 8. This is mainly seen in Ultra Sun Ultra Moon with the Ultra Recon Squad, who are aliens posing as humans going into the normal world. The mechanic of differently sized Pokemon is present in the Let's Go games. The Zygarde forms introduced in the anime and Generation 7 may have been an attempt to flesh out Zygarde, as its late inclusion may have felt a little bit rushed and even incomplete. The theme of sports design for gym leaders may have been remade into the soccer stadium gyms present in Generation 8, and finally, Ride Pokemon was made into a full mechanic in Generation 7 with Poke Ride, and then the Let's Go games have you ride certain Pokemon such as Onix and Snorlax if you set them as your following partner. The sheer amount of changes that occur within a developmental or even conceptual process for any sort of medium is insane. I usually don't have many other thoughts for these sort of things other than my immediate ones that I share with you. And ultimately, I think the big thing that's fun to think about is how our theorizing would have changed and how some theories are much closer to what the original plans of Pokemon were. Fairy types being aliens, being from the moon, how Team Flare always seems like very Men in Black-like to me, or how Lysander and Sycamore do very much seem to be two halves of the same coin, and even in the regular story, Sycamore seems to flat out state like, yeah, I could have been better. I could have tried to stop him, but I didn't, and I didn't listen. Still tying in those ideas of them being very much the same people, but just different routes. And how Diantha is not really, I'm gonna be real, Diantha is probably the weakest champion in any of the Pokemon games. Not as a, champion, but in terms of her story within the games themselves. She does have a very white attire, which I always associated with a celestial attire for fairy types and everything like that naturally. And it would have been very interesting to see her with Valerie's design, and how maybe we could have even had a story of us going to the moon, and how she would have been that queen, or again, that liaison between humanity and the aliens to bring about peace. I don't know where the story would have gone from there. Maybe Volcanions from the moon, and maybe many other fairy types would have been shown within these games to have either been from the moon or evolved on the Earth itself. Who knows? It's mind-blowing to see what the other path could have been. But I digress. And with that, we have covered everything in this semi-finale of this massive iceberg, and I'm very excited to one day just be done with this. It's been like a month and a half, I think, at this point. Share your thoughts on any of the theories and answers I proposed. And once again, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, share this with other people. Leaving a comment and giving watch hours to a channel is the best way to ensure a video gets spread around, other than sharing it directly, of course. And if you have the means and would like to support the channel, then please become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month. You get behind the scenes, you get videos a little early, and overall, more than anything, it ensures that I can continue making videos and I don't have to slow down with another job. So, with that then, I do want to say, it's time for us to shout out all the members of the channel. I realize I have a really bad habit of wearing green when I'm supposed to do this part of the video. Oops! Oh well, but anywho, we're going to start with our Gods of Hope, being Biggins, Heals for Life, and Bad 11, followed by our champions, Andrew Merchant, Ghostay, Elizabeth Levican, and Joshua Biggins Winslet, followed by all of our Knights of the Court, Fix My Nitrogen, Dylan Perrine, Double Plow, Annie Stone, Allen, Heals for Life, then all of our Wanderers being Pudding Fox, MN Ranger, Hawthorne, Andrew, Dyson. Oh no, I have to expand this so I can actually say everybody's names completely. Teshima, Zanzibar, Chef in a Bottle, Justin Green, JV Green, Mitty the Mad Mitty, Tavis Lamb, Venica Fox, Ben Dover, Dustmorty Yamper, Evil Chan, Max Supreme, Octo Shade, Woomy, Charles Reed, Rosa Pink San, Tyler, Darius Regan, Zilver Lazarus, Supporty Boy, DP, M, Pander, Nerders, Friedberg, I think I got it that time. Lost Mysteria, Something Kai, Kamuktog, 123, Hag, Adicadabra, Bach 1000, KO 23, Pre-Ignite, Cancer, Artie, Shiny Flash 52, Krill, Final Fantasy 13, 14, Matt S, Marco Man, Colin Moore, Kieran Trigg, Chris Sunwall, Zai, Plum, Plush Kid, Simon the Warrior, Nate Conley, Sophie Sabs 13, Wyatt Tom York, Sword Blaze, Slime, Daniel Lova, Quinn Jude, Rod Ellis, Zenko, Sweatsheet, Speed Noob, Tanapad, Ravi Ramsey, Sardonic, 8-Bit, Ducky, Pokeodin, Tracker, Soylent Bean, Chris Wills, Great Lakes Feather Co, Nix, Stars, Evan Karasu, Lenore Wolf 312, Iana, Traffy, Starbreed, Flostradamus, Zane Edom, Black Air Force Energy, just another vegan on YouTube, Sci-Fi Gaming, Red Wolf Eagle 13, Shori, Song, Ezo Kuritin, Whimsical Stray, Unknown Uwe, Lazy Link, 17, Metiel, 8 Cooler 1, Axel, Bad Choices Made, The Very Average Gamer, 8 Level 99 Boss, Bitter D, Destron Gaming, King Pie, Planet Blob, Happy Petabanda, Zempezetta, Zay Twaster, B10, TS, Jose Colado, Pokefangirl 23, Michael Gibbs, Konasuga, Guya, Libo, Cubic, Cularist, Dalton Queen, Jers, Brian Millie, Miley, I don't know, Julian Warner, Dice, Carby, Abdullah Alati, Red, Bleep, Bloom, Jack for Houses, Reshi, Snivy, Ruby, at EC, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Squid, Water, Ryan Smith, Gamer, Bad Dragonite, Just J, M, Betty Samaroon, Star, SMD with a horse, Hey Bell, Yeet, Micah 626 Gaming, Muse, Arwell, Lumiel, Gwendolyn, Eastgander 072, Andrew Frost, Beacon Anonymous, Summons, Law, Knock, Nguyen, Ian Ray, Big and C Night, whatever this is, corner of the comments, Scott, Carla, Heather Weisman, Dylan and Peters, and Malachi Burkup. Thank you all for supporting the channel and being members on Hero or Patreon. If you'd like to hear your name and support this channel and the videos that do come out, please do become a member. And with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't think I want to do, don't think I want to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you and I'll see you next time.